They called her hollow, empty, unworthy of love. But on the day her own mate rejected her in front of the entire kingdom, something ancient stirred within Sorrel's chest, something that had been sleeping, waiting, buried beneath years of lies. This is the story of a woman who rose from the ashes of humiliation to become the most powerful force the wolf kingdoms had ever seen. A story of betrayal, dark magic, and a love forged in ice and fire. Stay until the end to see how the rejected bride becomes a queen. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. Hit that like button. Let's begin. The morning sun broke over Greystone Keep like a blade-splitting stone, cold and merciless. Sorrel Ashford stood before the tall mirror in her chambers, staring at a reflection she barely recognized. The wedding gown was beautiful, white silk that cascaded down her frame like water, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. Her dark hair had been woven into an intricate braid, adorned with winter roses. She looked every bit the bride she was supposed to be, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Stop fidgeting," her stepmother, Lady Marin, snapped from behind her. The woman's voice was sharp as glass, always had been. "You're already fortunate beyond measure that Adrian agreed to this union. The least you can do is look grateful." Sorrel's jaw tightened. Grateful, as if she'd asked for any of this. "I'm trying," she said quietly. Marin's reflection appeared in the mirror, her cold gray eyes narrowing. She was a beautiful woman, sharp features, blonde hair pulled back severely, always dressed impeccably. But there was something cruel in the set of her mouth, something that had been there since the day she'd married Sorrel's father. "Try harder. You're representing this family today. Don't you dare embarrass us." Marin reached out and adjusted the neckline of Sorrel's dress with rough fingers. "We've spent a fortune on this wedding. The least you can do is pretend to be worth it." Sorrel wanted to say something, wanted to ask why nothing she ever did was good enough, but the words died in her throat. They always did. Her stepmother had raised her since she was 6, after her real mother died in childbirth, trying to give Lord Ashford a son. The baby hadn't survived either, and in all those years since, Sorrel had never once felt like she belonged, not in her own home, not in her own skin. "Where's father?" Sorrel asked, desperate to change the subject. "Busy," Marin said curtly, turning away to examine the jewelry laid out on the vanity. "He'll meet you at the ceremony. He's with the Alpha, finalizing the trade agreements." Of course he would be. Lord Ashford barely looked at her anymore, not since the tests, not since the shame. Every wolf-blooded child in the 5 kingdoms underwent the awakening at 13, a sacred ritual to summon their inner wolf. It was supposed to be a celebration, a rite of passage, the moment when a young shifter discovered their true nature, their power, their place in the pack hierarchy. But when Sorrel's turn came, nothing happened. She remembered it so clearly, even now, 7 years later. The ritual chamber deep beneath Greystone Keep, the circle of elders chanting in the old tongue, the moonlight streaming through the crystal ceiling, her father watching with expectant eyes. The elder had cut her palm, let her blood drip onto the ancient stone altar. The chanting had grown louder. The air had crackled with energy. And then, silence. No transformation. No surge of power. No golden eyes or claws or howl that shook the rafters. Just Sorrel, standing alone in the circle, bleeding and confused and terrified. The elders had called her hollow, a body without a soul, a shifter without a beast. Her father's disappointment had been crushing, Marin's contempt unrelenting, and her stepsister Linnea, beautiful, perfect, fully shifted Linnea, had looked at her with pity that felt worse than hatred. For 7 years, Sorrel had lived with that label. Hollow, defective, less than. She'd watched Linnea shift for the first time at 13, her wolf a beautiful silver creature with eyes like amber. She'd watched her father beam with pride. She'd watched Marin finally smile with genuine warmth, and she'd wondered what was wrong with her. But Adrian Corvain, the son of the Silver Claw Pack's Alpha, had still agreed to marry her. Not out of love, of course. Sorrel knew that much. It was politics. Her family needed the alliance. The Silver Claw Pack controlled the trade routes through the southern territories, and Greystone needed access to move their coal and iron. Adrian's family wanted Greystone's mines and the wealth they produced. And she? She was just the currency. The bargaining chip. The hollow girl nobody wanted but everyone could use. Still, she'd told herself it would be fine. Adrian was kind, handsome. He'd smiled at her during their one formal meeting 3 months ago, even held her hand during the garden walk. He'd told her she had pretty eyes. He'd made her laugh. Maybe he didn't care that she was hollow. Maybe he'd see her for who she really was, not just what she lacked. Maybe she could be happy. Maybe. A knock at the door made Sorrel jump. "It's time," Maren said, smoothing her own gown, a deep burgundy that made her look regal and cold. "Compose yourself, Sorrel, and for heaven's sake, smile. You look like you're walking to your execution." Sorrel forced her lips into something that might have resembled a smile. Maren's expression didn't change. "That'll have to do." The great hall of Greystone Keep was magnificent. Hundreds of guests filled the stone chamber, alphas and lunas from neighboring packs, warriors in ceremonial armor, noble families dripping in furs and silver. Torches blazed along the walls, casting flickering shadows across the vaulted ceiling. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke and the expensive perfumes the noble ladies wore. Banners hung from the rafters. The gray wolf of House Ashford, alongside the silver wolf of House Corvain, soon to be joined in alliance. At the far end of the hall, beneath an archway of white winter roses and evergreen boughs, stood Adrian Corvain. He was everything a girl was supposed to want. Tall and broad-shouldered, his golden hair gleaming in the firelight. He wore a black jacket embroidered with the silver wolf of his house, and his posture was straight, confident, handsome in that effortless way that some people just were, but his expression was unreadable. Sorrel's heart hammered in her chest as she walked down the aisle alone. Her father hadn't come to escort her. She'd waited in the antechamber for 15 minutes before a servant had quietly informed her that Lord Ashford was detained and she should proceed on her own. Another small humiliation she'd have to swallow. The crowd's eyes followed her every step. She could feel their judgment like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. Hollow, defective, unworthy. She heard the whispers. Even with the musicians playing, even with the rustle of fabric and the murmur of conversation, she heard them. That's the hollow girl. I can't believe Adrian's actually going through with it. His father must have insisted, poor boy. She's pretty enough, I suppose. Shame about the wolf. Sorrel kept her eyes fixed on Adrian, forced herself to keep walking, one foot in front of the other. The aisle felt a mile long. She passed her stepmother, sitting in the front row beside Linnea. Maren's face was carefully neutral. Linnea gave her a small, encouraging smile that only made Sorrel feel worse. When she finally reached the archway, Adrian still didn't meet her eyes. That should have been her first warning. The officiant, a grizzled elder named Thorne with a long gray beard and ceremonial robes, stepped forward, his voice booming across the hall. "We gather today under the witness of the moon and stars to celebrate the sacred bond between Adrian Corvain, son of Alpha Roderick of the Silver Claw Pack, and Sorrel Ashford, daughter of Lord Brennan of House Ashford. This union will strengthen our packs, secure our futures, and bring prosperity to both our houses." The words felt hollow, empty, just like her. "The bond between mates is sacred," Elder Thorne continued. "It is a gift from the old gods, a connection deeper than blood, stronger than steel. Today, we witness the forging of such a bond." Sorrel dared a glance at Adrian. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight. "Do you, Adrian Corvain, accept Sorrel Ashford as your mate? Do you swear to protect her, honor her, and stand by her side through all trials?" Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. The silence stretched. Sorrel's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. She could feel it. "Adrian?" Elder Thorne prompted gently. Adrian took a breath. Then he turned to face the crowd. "No." The word cut through the hall like a thunderclap. Sorrel froze. Her mind went blank. That couldn't be. He didn't just... "I beg your pardon?" Elder Thorne said, his bushy eyebrows shooting up. "I can't do this," Adrian said louder, addressing the entire hall now. His voice didn't waver. It was clear, firm, final. "I can't marry her." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Sorrel felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Adrian, please," she whispered, reaching for his arm. He jerked away from her touch as if she'd burned him. "Don't," he said sharply, then softer but somehow more cruel. "Just don't." He turned back to this crowd, and Sorrel saw it then, the set of his shoulders, the lift of his chin. This wasn't fear or cold feet. This was planned, deliberate. I won't tie myself to a hollow, Adrian announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. My pack deserves better than a defective mate. My children deserve better than a mother who can't even shift. The words hit Sorrel like physical blows. She heard someone in the crowd gasp. Someone else murmured agreement. "You knew," Sorrel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You knew what I was when you agreed to this." "I thought I could overlook it," Adrian said, finally looking at her. His blue eyes were cold, distant, like she was a stranger. "I thought maybe it wouldn't matter, but it does. You're not a wolf, Sorrel. You're nothing. And I won't spend the rest of my life pretending otherwise, just to please our families." "Adrian, this is highly irregular," Elder Thorne started. "I don't care," Adrian interrupted. "I'm invoking my right of rejection. It's written in pack law. Any wolf can reject a mate before the bond is sealed." "But the families have already agreed." "Then they can unagreed," Adrian said flatly. He looked back at Sorrel, and there was something almost like pity in his eyes now, which was worse, so much worse than hatred would have been. "I'm sorry, Sorrel, but I can't do this to myself. I can't do this to my future pack." Around them, the hall had erupted into chaos. Voices rose in shock, scandal, excitement. Some guests looked horrified. Others nodded in agreement. A few were already whispering to their neighbors, spreading the gossip like wildfire. Sorrel's stepmother stood near the front, her face carefully blank. But Sorrel could see the glitter of satisfaction in her eyes. She'd probably known this was coming, probably encouraged it. Her father was nowhere to be seen. "I, Adrian Corvain, reject you, Sorrel Ashford," Adrian said formally, his voice ringing out over the noise. "I sever any claim you have to me or my pack. You are not my mate. You never will be." The bond, thin and barely formed as it was, just the faint thread that had connected them since their betrothal, snapped. Sorrel gasped, clutching her chest as a sharp, searing pain tore through her. It felt like something vital had been ripped away, leaving only an aching void. Her knees buckled. She stumbled backward, barely catching herself on the edge of the archway. No one moved to help her. Adrian straightened his jacket, composed himself, and then turned on his heel. And he walked away. Just like that. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone, and he strode down the aisle with his head high, disappearing through the great doors without a backward glance. Sorrel stood there, alone beneath the archway of white roses, her wedding gown suddenly feeling like a shroud. Her chest heaved, her hands shook, the whispers grew louder. "Oh, poor thing. Did you see her face? I always knew this would happen. What did she expect? She's hollow." Adrian made the right choice. A hollow queen would have weakened the entire pack. His children would have been defective. Elder Thorne cleared his throat awkwardly, his face flushed. The ceremony is concluded. I apologize for the disruption. Please, everyone, make your way to the feast hall. The refreshments will still be served." As if that mattered. As if anyone cared about food and wine when they'd just witnessed the scandal of the season. Sorrel's legs finally gave out. She sank to her knees, her bouquet falling from her hands, white petals scattering across the stone floor like snow. And then she heard it. Laughter. Quiet at first, then louder. Someone in the crowd was laughing. A sharp, cruel sound. Then another joined in. And another. Sorrel's vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. She forced herself to stand even though her legs felt like water, even though her chest felt like it was caving in, even though she wanted to scream or disappear or both. She gathered what was left of her dignity, lifted her chin, and walked. Not down the aisle, not toward the crowd of vultures watching her humiliation with hungry eyes. She walked toward the side door, the servants' entrance, the path that would take her away from this nightmare. Behind her, the whispers followed. "She's running!" "Of course she is. What else can she do?" Sorrel pushed through the door and ran. She didn't stop until she reached the cliffs. The northern edge of Greystone's territory was a jagged line of rock that dropped away into a churning gray sea hundreds of feet below. The wind howled across the stones, cold and unforgiving, whipping Sorrel's hair around her face and tearing at her wedding dress. She stood at the edge, staring down into the void. The waves crashed against the rocks below, white foam rising and falling. The sound was deafening, hypnotic. It would be so easy. One step. That's all it would take. No more shame, no more whispers. No more waking up every day knowing she was broken, defective, less than everyone around her. Just silence. Peace. Sorrel closed her eyes and felt the wind push against her. Don't. The voice came from behind her, low and rough. Sorrel spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, maybe 20 feet away. No, not just a man. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the dying sun. His hair was black as midnight, falling just past his collar, and his eyes were silver, not gray, not blue, not any normal color. Silver, like molten steel, like starlight, like something not quite human. He wore a long black coat lined with fur, leather armor beneath it, and there was something about the way he moved, smooth, predatory, deliberate, that made every instinct in Sorrel's body scream danger. This was an alpha, a real one. She could feel the power rolling off him in waves, pressing against her skin like heat from a forge. "Who are you?" Sorrel managed to say, her voice hoarse. The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. His silver eyes swept over her, taking in the torn wedding dress, the tangled hair, the tear-streaked face she was sure she had despite her best efforts. "Kael Thorne," he said finally. Sorrel's breath caught. Even she, isolated and dismissed as she was, knew that name. Kael Thorne, the Alpha King of the Frostbound Territories, ruler of the largest, most brutal wolf kingdom in the frozen north. A man who'd killed his own father to take the throne when he was barely 20. A man whose wolf was said to be so powerful, so wrong, that even other alphas feared him. A man who hadn't left his territory in 5 years. And he was standing 20 feet away from her. "What do you want?" Sorrel asked, taking an instinctive step back. Her heels slipped on the edge of the cliff. Loose stones skittered over the side, disappearing into the void below. Before she could fall, Kael moved. He was impossibly fast. One moment he was across the clearing, the next his hand was wrapped around her wrist, hauling her back from the edge with strength that should have hurt, but somehow didn't. Sorrel gasped as he pulled her against his chest, steadying her. And then something strange happened. The moment his skin touched hers, a warmth flooded through her, sudden and overwhelming, like a fire catching in dry wood. It started where his hand gripped her wrist and spread outward, racing up her arm, through her chest, down to her core. It chased away the cold, the emptiness, the horrible aching void Adrian's rejection had left behind. For the first time in her life, Sorrel felt full. Kael's silver eyes widened. His grip on her wrist tightened, and she felt his whole body go rigid. "What?" he started. Then he released her like she'd burned him, stepping back quickly. They stared at each other, both breathing hard. "What was that?" Sorrel whispered. Kael didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his hand, the one that had touched her, like it had betrayed him. Then his eyes snapped back to her face, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "You're the Ashford girl," he said finally. Not a question, a statement. "Yes." Sorrel's voice came out steadier than she felt. "The one who was rejected today." Shame flooded through her, hot and bitter. "You heard." Everyone heard. Kael's expression didn't change. No pity, no judgment, just observation. News travels fast in the kingdoms, especially news that entertaining. Sorrel looked away, her throat tight. "Then you know I'm hollow, worthless, not worth—" "You're not hollow." Her head snapped back up. Kael stepped closer, and the air between them seemed to crackle with energy, with possibility. "I don't understand," Sorrel said. "Neither do I." Kael's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping there. "But I felt it. When I touched you, something inside you reacted, responded." Sorrel shook her head, confused and overwhelmed. "That's impossible. I've been tested multiple times. I don't have a wolf. I don't have anything." "You have something," Kael interrupted, his voice hard. "Certain. Something powerful. Something old." His silver eyes burned into hers. "And I need it." Sorrel's pulse quickened. The wind had died down, and suddenly the cliff felt very quiet, very isolated. Need it for what? Kale was silent for a long moment, and Sorrel got the sense he was deciding something, weighing options, calculating risks. Then he said, "I'm dying." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sorrel blinked. "What?" "The wolf inside me is killing me," Kale continued, his voice low and rough. Each word seemed pulled from him reluctantly. "It's not natural. It's ancient. A curse passed down through my bloodline. Every alpha king of the Frostbound has carried it, and every one of them has died screaming before their 30th year." He met her eyes. "I'm 27. I have maybe a year left. Less, if I'm unlucky." Sorrel's mind reeled, the most powerful alpha in the Five Kingdoms. The man kings and warlords feared, dying. "I don't understand," she said. "What does that have to do with me?" Kale took another step toward her, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from him, close enough to see the faint scars on his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. "For 10 years I've felt the beast inside me growing stronger," he said quietly. "It whispers constantly, tells me to kill, to destroy, to burn everything to ash. Every day it gets louder, harder to control. I've tried everything, shamans, healers, blood magic, ancient rituals. Nothing works, nothing even slows it down." He paused, his silver eyes searching her face. "But when I touched you just now, the beast went quiet. For the first time in a decade, I felt still, like the thing inside me fell asleep." Sorrel's breath caught. That's not possible." "I don't deal in impossibilities," Kyle said. "I deal in results. And the result is that you somehow silenced the most powerful curse in the Northern Kingdoms with nothing but your presence." He took her hand, and again that warmth flooded through her. Gentler this time, but no less real. Kael's eyes fluttered closed for just a moment, and Sorrel saw something cross his face. Relief. Actual, genuine relief. "There," he breathed. "Do you feel it?" And she did. She felt something, like a connection forming, like two puzzle pieces sliding together, like she was standing next to a massive bonfire and finally getting warm after being cold her entire life. "I don't understand what this is," Sorrel whispered. "Neither do I," Kyle admitted, "but I'm not going to question it." He released her hand and stepped back, his expression shifting back to that unreadable mask. "So I'm going to make you an offer, Sorrel Ashford." Sorrel's heart pounded. "What kind of offer?" "Marry me." The world seemed to stop. The wind died. The waves fell silent. Even her own heartbeat seemed to pause. "What?" Sorrel whispered. "Come with me to the Frostbound," Kael said, his voice steady and sure. "Become my queen. Share my throne. In exchange, I'll give you everything you've ever wanted. Power, respect, revenge on everyone who ever looked down on you. You'll never be nothing again." Sorrel's mind spun. I can't. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Kael said. "I know you were humiliated today. Cast aside like garbage by a man who wasn't worthy of you. I know they laughed at you. I know your own family abandoned you." His silver eyes bored into hers. "And I know that you're stronger than they think, because you're still standing here, still breathing, still fighting." "I'm not fighting," Sorrel said bitterly. "I was about to jump." "But you didn't," Kael countered. "That's what matters." Sorrel looked away, her eyes burning. "Why would you want me?" "I'm hollow, broken. I can't even—" "You silenced a curse that's killed every king in my line for 300 years, Kael interrupted. "You are many things, Sorrel Ashford, but broken is not one of them." He moved closer again, and this time Sorrel didn't step back. "I won't lie to you," Kael said quietly. "This isn't a love match. I need you because you're the first thing that's given me hope in a decade. And you need an escape, a new life, a chance to prove to everyone who dismissed you that they were wrong." "And if I say no?" Sorrel asked. Kael's expression didn't change. "Then I'll leave. And you'll go back to Greystone and live with the shame of today for the rest of your life. They'll marry you off to some minor noble who needs your family's money. You'll spend your days being reminded that you're not enough, that you'll never be enough." The words hit hard because they were true. Sorrel looked past him, back toward Greystone Keep, toward the life that had just rejected her, toward a future of whispers and pity and loneliness. Then she looked at Kyle Thorne, at this dangerous, dying king who was offering her something she'd never had, a choice. "If I come with you," Sorrel said slowly, "what would you expect from me?" "Stay close to me," Kyle said. "Let me figure out why you quiet the beast. Help me survive. In return, you'll be a queen. You'll have wealth, power, protection. And when the time comes," he paused, "when the time comes, and you want revenge on those who wronged you, I'll help you take it." Sorrel's pulse raced. It was insane. He was a stranger, a killer, a man with a curse that might kill them both. But he was also offering her a way out, a way to stop being nothing. "Everyone will say I'm running away," Sorrel said. "Let them," Kael replied. "And when you return as a queen, they can say it to your face, if they dare." A queen. Her. Sorrel Ashford, the hollow girl, the rejected bride, the family embarrassment. A queen. Something inside her chest, something that had been dying all day, maybe dying her whole life, suddenly sparked to life. "Yes," she heard herself say. Kael's eyes widened slightly. "Yes?" "Yes," Sorrel repeated, stronger this time. "I'll marry you." For the first time, something that might have been a smile crossed Kael's face. It didn't reach his eyes, but it was there. "Good," he said. "Then we leave tonight." "Tonight?" Sorrel blinked. "I don't trust your family not to interfere once they realize you're gone," Kael said. "And I don't waste time. My men are camped 2 miles north. We can be across the border by dawn." He offered her his hand. Sorrel looked at it, rough, scarred, strong, and then back at his face. This was it. The moment that would change everything. She could go back, apologize, beg her family to take her in, live out her days in shame. Or she could take his hand and become someone new, someone powerful. Sorrel reached out and placed her hand in his. The warmth flooded through her again, and this time she didn't question it. She just held on. They rode through the night in silence. Kael's men were waiting exactly where he'd said they would be. A dozen warriors camped in a clearing 2 miles north of Greystone's borders. They were enormous, all of them, dressed in black leather and fur, weapons strapped to their backs and hips. Their horses were massive creatures, dark as shadows, with eyes that gleamed in the firelight. When Sorrel appeared beside Kael, still wearing her torn wedding dress, not one of them showed surprise. They simply packed up camp with military efficiency and prepared to move out. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, brought Sorrel a horse and a heavy fur cloak without a word. She took both, grateful not to have to ask. The cloak smelled like pine and leather and something wild she couldn't name. It swallowed her small frame, but it was warm, warmer than anything she'd felt in hours. Kael swung onto his horse in one fluid motion, then glanced back at her. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Sorrel said, though her hand shook as she gripped the reins. She'd learned as a child, before everything fell apart, before the awakening that never came. Her father used to take her riding through Greystone's forests, back when he still looked at her like she mattered. She pushed the memory away and mounted the horse. It shifted beneath her, powerful muscles moving, but it didn't bolt. Just waited. "We have a long way to go," Kael said. "If you need to stop, tell me." Sorrel nodded, not trusting her voice. And then they were moving, disappearing into the forest like ghosts, leaving Greystone Keep and everything it represented far behind. The journey north was brutal. They traveled hard, stopping only when the horses needed rest. Kael pushed them relentlessly, as if something was chasing them. Maybe something was. Sorrel didn't ask. The landscape changed as they moved deeper into the northern territories. The forest grew denser, the trees taller and darker. Snow began to fall on the 3rd day, light flurries at first, then heavier, until everything was blanketed in white. The temperature dropped with every mile. Sorrel had never been this far north, had never felt cold like this. It sank into her bones, made her teeth chatter no matter how many furs she wrapped around herself. But something strange happened whenever Kael came near. That warmth would bloom in her chest again, spreading outward, pushing back the cold. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. Kale barely spoke to her during the journey. He rode ahead most of the time, silent and distant, his attention focused on the path. His men were the same, professional, efficient, but not unfriendly. They just didn't waste words. On the fifth night, they camped in a shallow cave carved into the side of a cliff. The wind howled outside, driving snow sideways, but inside the cave it was almost warm. One of the men, a younger warrior named Finn with kind eyes, built a fire while the others tended to the horses. Sorrel huddled close to the flames, trying to stop shivering. Kyle sat across from her, sharpening a knife with methodical strokes. The sound of steel on whetstone filled the silence. "How much farther?" Sorrel asked finally. 2 weeks, Kyle said without looking up. "Maybe less if the weather holds." 2 weeks. 2 weeks until she reached a frozen kingdom she'd never seen, to become queen to a man she didn't know, with a curse she didn't understand. What had she done? "You're afraid," Kyle said. Not a question. Sorrel looked up sharply. "I'm not. I can hear your heartbeat." His silver eyes flicked to her. "It's racing." Damn him. Damn his wolf hearing. "Fine," Sorrel said. "I'm terrified. Is that what you want to hear?" Kale set down the knife and whetstone. "I told you before. I won't hurt you. You also told me you're dying, that there's a monster inside you that wants to burn everything to ash." Sorrel pulled the fur tighter around her shoulders. "Forgive me if that doesn't exactly inspire confidence." Something that might have been amusement crossed Kael's face. "Fair enough." They sat in silence for a moment, just the crackle of the fire between them. "Can I ask you something?" Sorrel said. "You just did." "Another something." Kale gestured for her to continue. "Why haven't you married before? You're a king. You must have had offers." Kale's expression darkened. "I've had plenty of offers. Alliances, political arrangements, desperate fathers trying to secure their daughters' futures." He picked up the knife again, turning it over in his hands. "I refused them all." "Why?" "Because I knew what I was," Kyle said quietly. "A dying man with a curse that's killed everyone who carried it. What kind of life would that be for a queen? To watch her husband slowly lose his mind, to fear him, to wait for the day he finally snaps." Sorrel's throat tightened. "But you asked me." "Because you're different." Kyle met her eyes. "Because you quiet the beast. Because for the first time in 10 years, I have hope that I might actually survive." He paused. "And because you needed an escape as badly as I needed a solution." It was honest, at least. Brutally so. "What happens when we get to your kingdom?" Sorrel asked. "What do I need to know?" Kale leaned back against the cave wall. "The Frostbound is not like the Southern Territories. It's harsh, brutal. The weak don't survive there. They can't. My people respect strength above everything else." His eyes traveled over her small frame. "They're not going to accept you easily. Because I'm hollow. Because you're an outsider," Kyle corrected. "And because they'll see you as weak. You're small, you can't shift, and you come from a family that just publicly humiliated you." He said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. "They'll test you, push you, try to break you." Sorrel's hands clenched in her lap. "And what am I supposed to do?" "Don't break," Kale said simply. "Show them you're stronger than you look. Prove them wrong." He tilted his head, studying her. "You survived 20 years in a family that hated you. You survived today. You're still here. That's not nothing." It should have felt like encouragement. Instead, it felt like a warning. "What about your court?" Sorrel asked. "Your advisors. Won't they object to this marriage?" "Probably." Kyle's expression didn't change. "They object to most things I do. I stopped caring what they thought a long time ago." "That must make ruling difficult." "It makes it efficient," Kyle said. "I don't waste time on politics or diplomacy. I make decisions, and they follow them. Or they don't, and I replace them." Sorrel shivered, and not from the cold. This was the man she'd bound herself to. A king who ruled through fear and strength, who'd killed his own father, who carried a curse that turned him into a monster. And yet when he looked at her, she didn't see cruelty. She saw exhaustion, loneliness, a man carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear. Maybe they weren't so different after all. "Get some rest," Kale said, rising to his feet. "We leave at first light." He moved to the mouth of the cave, taking first watch, his broad shoulders blocking out the firelight. Sorrel lay down near the fire, wrapped in furs, and tried to sleep. But she couldn't stop thinking about what waited for her at the end of this journey. A frozen throne, a dying king, and a future she couldn't begin to imagine. The frostbound capital appeared on the horizon on the 18th day. Sorrel had thought Greystone Keep was impressive, with its gray stone walls and tall towers. But Icehaven made Greystone look like a country cottage. The city was carved into the side of a mountain, its walls built from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Massive towers pierced the sky, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. Snow fell constantly, blanketing everything in white, and the temperature was so cold that Sorrel's breath froze in the air. But what struck her most were the wolves. They were everywhere. Massive creatures the size of horses, with fur and shades of gray and black and white, prowling the streets alongside humans as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Some pulled sleds loaded with supplies. Others simply watched from doorways or rooftops, their eyes gleaming with intelligence. "They're beautiful," Sorrel whispered. "They're dangerous," Kale corrected. "Don't approach them unless you're invited. Some of them are shifters in wolf form. Others are companions. Either way, they don't take kindly to strangers." As if to prove his point, one of the massive wolves, a silver-gray beast with scars across its muzzle, lifted its head and stared directly at Sorrel as they passed. Its eyes were gold and ancient, and she felt pinned beneath that gaze. Then it huffed, almost dismissively, and went back to whatever it had been doing. "Friendly," Sorrel muttered. Kale's lips twitched, almost a smile. They rode through the city gates, and the activity around them intensified. People stopped what they were doing to watch their king return. Some bowed. Others simply stared. All of them noticed Sorrel. She could feel their eyes on her, assessing, judging. A small woman from the south, wearing borrowed furs, riding beside their king. The whispers started almost immediately. "Who is she? Another southern bride? She looks half frozen already. Too small, too weak." Sorrel kept her chin up and her eyes forward, just as she'd done walking down the aisle at Greystone. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. The palace loomed ahead, a fortress built into the mountain itself, all sharp angles and cold stone, with ice clinging to the windows like claws. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like a blade or a storm. They dismounted in the courtyard, and servants appeared immediately to take the horses. Kyle's men dispersed without a word, each heading to their own quarters with the ease of long routine. A tall woman with steel-gray hair and a face like carved granite approached. She wore armor, actual armor, not ceremonial, and carried herself like a warrior. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing her head to Kale. "Welcome home." "Commander Wraith," Kale acknowledged. Then he gestured to Sorrel. "This is Sorrel, my queen." The temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Commander Wraith's eyes moved to Sorrel, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. Not hatred, not anger, just dismissal. As if Sorrel were a problem too small to bother with. "Your queen," Wraith repeated flatly. "Yes," Kael said, his voice hard as iron. "Is that going to be a problem?" Wraith held his gaze for a long moment. Then she said, "The council will want to meet her." "I'm sure they will." "Tonight," Wraith pressed. "They'll insist." Kale's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine, arrange it." Wraith bowed again and strode away, barking orders to the servants. Sorrel turned to Kyle. "She hates me." "She doesn't know you well enough to hate you yet," Kyle said. "Give her time." That didn't sound like a joke. Kyle led her through the palace, down corridors of black stone lit by torches that never seemed to give off quite enough light. The place was massive, easily 3 times the size of Greystone Keep, and freezing despite the fires burning in every hearth. Finally, they reached a set of double doors. "These are your chambers," Kyle said, pushing them open. The room beyond was enormous. A 4-poster bed dominated the center, draped in heavy furs. A fireplace crackled in the corner, actually giving off real heat. Tall windows overlooked the city below, showing the endless expanse of snow and stone. It was beautiful. It was also a cage. "Where will you be?" Sorrel asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Kale gestured to another set of doors directly across the hall. "There." So close, but not close enough. There are servants, Kyle continued. They'll bring you anything you need, clothes, food, whatever you ask for. And tonight, this council meeting? I'll come get you when it's time. Kale's expression was unreadable. They're going to challenge you, question your right to be here. You need to be ready. Ready how? Don't show fear, Kyle said. Don't apologize for existing, and don't let them make you feel small. He paused at the doorway. You're a queen now, Sorrel. Start acting like one. Then he left, closing the door behind him. Sorrel stood alone in the massive chamber, surrounded by luxury and cold stone, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The servants came an hour later. 3 women, all tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of weathered faces that spoke of hard lives in harsh climates. They didn't smile, didn't speak except to give brief instructions. They drew a bath, hot water that smelled of pine and something medicinal, and Sorrel sank into it gratefully, letting the heat chase away the bone-deep cold of the journey. When she emerged, they'd laid out clothes for her. Not a gown. Practical clothing. Leather pants, a tunic of deep blue wool, boots lined with fur, and a heavy cloak. The kind of clothes a warrior might wear, not a decorative southern bride. Sorrel dressed slowly, getting used to the weight of the fabrics, the way they moved. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the delicate wedding dress, the carefully braided hair, the image of a proper noble lady. In their place was someone harder, sharper, someone who might actually survive in a place like this. The knock at her door came sooner than she expected. Kyle stood in the hallway, dressed in formal armor now, black leather and steel, with the wolf of his house embroidered in silver thread across his chest. His hair was pulled back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face, the intensity of those silver eyes. He looked every inch the Alpha King. "It's time," he said. Sorrel's stomach twisted into knots, but she followed him anyway. The council chamber was a vast hall with a long table carved from a single massive tree. Torches lined the walls, and the ceiling disappeared into shadows above. At least 20 people sat around the table, commanders, advisors, representatives from the major packs within the Frostbound territories. Every single one of them turned to stare as Sorrel entered. She felt their eyes like physical weight, assessing, judging, finding her wanting. Kyle led her to the head of the table and pulled out a chair beside his own. "Sit." Sorrel sat, keeping her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. She would not slouch, would not fidget, would not give them any reason to dismiss her more than they already had. "Council," Kyle said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "This is Sorrel, my queen." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, an older man with a scarred face and gray streaking his dark hair spoke. Commander Wraith sat beside him, her expression carved from stone. "Your Majesty," the man said carefully. "Forgive our surprise. We were not aware you were seeking a mate." "I wasn't," Kale said bluntly. "And then I found her." "She's from Greystone," another council member said. "A woman with braided blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice." "From the Ashford family." "Yes," Kale confirmed. "The family that produces coal and iron," the woman continued. "Useful resources, but hardly a strategic alliance for the Frostbound." "I didn't choose her for resources," Kale said, an edge creeping into his voice. "Then why?" The scarred man, Commander Varric, Sorrel would learn, leaned forward. "With respect, Your Majesty, we deserve an explanation. The Queen of the Frostbound is not just your mate. She represents our entire kingdom. She must be strong, capable, worthy of the title." Sorrel's nails dug into her palms, but she kept her expression neutral. "And you don't think I am," she said quietly. Every eye in the room snapped to her. Commander Varric's eyebrows rose. "I think you are a stranger from a weak southern family who can't even shift. I think you have no experience with leadership, no understanding of our culture, and no business sitting in that chair." The words were brutal, meant to cut, to make her run. Sorrel felt her face flush, but she didn't look away. "You're right," she said. "I can't shift. I have no wolf. By every measure you use to judge strength, I'm lacking." Murmurs rippled around the table. Kale's hand tensed on the armrest of his chair, But he didn't interrupt. But I'm still here, Sorrel continued, her voice growing stronger. I survived 20 years in a family that saw me as defective. I survived public humiliation and rejection. And I made the choice to come here, to this frozen kingdom where everyone looks at me like I'm already dead, because I refuse to be nothing. She met Varric's eyes. So you can question my right to this chair all you want, but I'm not going anywhere. The silence stretched. Then Commander Wraith spoke for the first time. Pretty words, she said coldly. But words mean nothing in the Frostbound. Here, we value action, strength, survival. She leaned forward. You say you refuse to be nothing. Prove it. How? Sorrel asked. Wraith smiled, and it wasn't friendly. The trials. Kael's head snapped toward her. No. It's tradition, Wraith said calmly. Any wolf who wishes to join a new pack must prove themselves worthy. Your little bride wants to be our queen? Let her earn it. She's not a wolf, Kael growled. The trials are designed for shifters. She'll be killed. Then she's not worthy, Wraith said simply. The rest of the council erupted into argument. Some agreed with Wraith. Others called it madness. The scarred commander looked troubled but didn't object. Sorrel's mind raced. She didn't even know what these trials were, but from Kael's reaction, they were clearly dangerous, possibly deadly. But if she refused, she'd never be accepted. She'd be the weak southern bride who hid behind her husband, who proved every single doubt they had about her. I'll do it, Sorrel heard herself say. The chamber fell silent. Kael turned to her, his silver eyes wide. Sorrel, no, you don't understand what you're agreeing to. Then explain it to me, she said quietly, meeting his gaze. Kael's jaw worked. For a moment she thought he might refuse, might simply forbid it as king. But then he seemed to recognize something in her expression, the same stubborn determination that had made her take his hand on that cliff. The trials are a series of tests, he said finally, his voice tight. Combat, survival, endurance. They're designed to push a wolf to their absolute limit. Most shifters struggle to complete them. You, without a wolf, will have to be smarter, Sorrel finished. Faster, more creative. You'll die, Kael said bluntly. Maybe, Sorrel agreed. Or maybe I'll prove I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She turned back to the council. When do the trials begin? Commander Wraith's smile widened. 3 days. That should give you time to prepare. It sounded like a funeral arrangement. The council meeting ended shortly after, the various members dispersing with barely concealed anticipation. They were going to enjoy watching her fail, watching her break. Sorrel stood and walked out of the chamber with her head high, even though her legs felt like water. Kael caught up with her in the corridor. That was foolish, he said, his voice low and dangerous. That was necessary, Sorrel countered. You could die. I could, Sorrel agreed, stopping to face him. But if I don't do this, I'm already dead, just in a different way. They'll never accept me, never respect me, never see me as anything but the hollow girl you brought home out of desperation. Kael's expression was tortured. I brought you here to help me, not to get yourself killed proving a point. You brought me here to be a queen, Sorrel said, so let me be one. They stared at each other in the dim corridor, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Finally, Kael's shoulders sagged slightly. If you're going to do this, you need to train. I'll assign someone. You, Sorrel interrupted. If I'm going to survive this, I need to learn from the best. And like it or not, that's you. Kael looked at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he almost smiled. First light tomorrow, he said. Don't be late. The training began before dawn. Kael woke her when the sky was still dark, the stars fading against the coming sunrise. Sorrel dressed quickly in the practical clothes the servants had left, leather and wool that wouldn't restrict her movement. He led her to a courtyard deep within the palace grounds, surrounded by high walls. Snow covered the ground, unmarked and pristine. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. The trials have 3 parts, Kael said without preamble. Combat, survival, and the hunt. Combat is straightforward. You'll face an opponent in the ring. You don't have to win. You just have to survive long enough to prove you won't go down easily. How long is long enough? Sorrel asked. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It didn't sound like much. But Sorrel had seen wolves fight, seen the speed, the strength, the raw power they wielded. 5 minutes might as well be an eternity. The survival trial tests your ability to endure, Kyle continued. You'll be left in the wilderness with minimal supplies. The goal is to make it back to Icehaven before you freeze or starve. Most complete it in 2 days. And the hunt? Kale's expression darkened. The hunt is the most dangerous. You'll be given a target, an animal, usually a deer or elk, and you have to track it, kill it, and bring back proof. Alone, in hostile territory. Sorrel's mouth went dry. I've never hunted anything in my life. I know, Kyle said. That's why we're starting now. He moved to the center of the courtyard and turned to face her. Attack me. Sorrel blinked. What? You heard me. Attack me. However you can. I can't. You're twice my size. You're an alpha. And your opponent in the combat trial will be the same, Kyle interrupted. So learn to adapt. Attack me. Sorrel hesitated. Then she lunged forward, aiming a clumsy punch at his chest. Kyle caught her wrist effortlessly and swept her legs out from under her. Sorrel hit the snow hard, the air rushing from her lungs. Again, Kyle said, offering his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. Again. They trained for hours. Kyle teaching her to move, to dodge, to use her smaller size as an advantage rather than a weakness. He was relentless, brutal even, never pulling his punches, never letting her rest. But he was also patient. When she made the same mistake 3 times, he showed her a better way. When she fell, he helped her up. And slowly, so slowly, Sorrel began to understand. She couldn't fight like a wolf. She'd never have their strength or speed, but she could be faster, more unpredictable. She could learn to read an opponent's movements, to anticipate rather than react. Good, Kyle said when she finally managed to dodge one of his strikes and land a hit, albeit a weak one, on his ribs. Better. Sorrel was breathing hard, her whole body aching, but something warm bloomed in her chest. Pride. They trained every morning for the next 3 days. Combat in the courtyard, tracking in the forests surrounding the city. Basic survival skills. How to start a fire without tools, how to find water, which plants were edible and which would kill her. Kale was a merciless teacher, but Sorrel learned. And she noticed something else too. The more time they spent together, the stronger that strange warmth between them grew. Not just when they touched, but even when they were near each other. As if their very presence was compatible. Complementary. Kyle felt it too. She could tell from the way he sometimes paused mid-instruction, his silver eyes finding hers, that same confusion and wonder crossing his face. On the night before the trials, Kyle found her standing at the window of her chambers, staring out at the snow-covered city below. Can't sleep? He asked from the doorway. Would you? Sorrel replied without turning. He crossed the room to stand beside her. Close enough that she could feel that warmth radiating from him, pushing back the cold. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. It's not too late to back out. Yes, it is, Sorrel said. The moment I agreed, I committed. If I back out now, I'll never be anything but a coward in their eyes. Better a live coward than a dead hero. Sorrel finally looked at him. Is that what you would do? Back down? Kyle's jaw tightened. No. Then don't ask me to. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the snow fall. I'm afraid, Sorrel admitted quietly. Good, Kyle said. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. And if I fail? Kyle turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his silver eyes stole her breath. Then I'll burn this entire kingdom to the ground before I let them touch you. It should have sounded like madness. Instead, it sounded like a promise. Sorrel felt something shift in her chest. Not the warmth this time. Something deeper, something that terrified her more than any trial ever could. Don't die tomorrow, Kyle said, his voice rough. I'll do my best, Sorrel managed. He reached out and took her hand, and that warmth flooded through her one more time. Sleep, he said. You'll need your strength. Then he was gone, leaving Sorrel alone with her fear and the impossible task waiting for her at dawn. The trials began at first light. The entire city turned out to watch. Thousands of people packed the arena, a massive stone circle carved into the mountainside, open to the sky above. Snow fell gently, dusting the ground, as Sorrel walked out into the center. She wore simple leather armor, light enough to move in but offering minimal protection. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid. She carried no weapons. Across from her, the arena gate opened and her opponent emerged. Commander Wraith. Of course it would be her. The older woman moved like a predator, all coiled strength and lethal grace. She wore similar armor, and her eyes gleamed with anticipation. 5 minutes? Kael's voice rang out from the royal box above. He sat on his throne, his expression carved from stone, but Sorrel could see the tension in his shoulders. Begin. Wraith didn't waste time. She shifted mid-stride, her body exploding into fur and muscle and teeth. Her wolf was massive, gray and scarred, with eyes like frozen amber. Sorrel ran, not away. Kael had taught her that running in a straight line was suicide. Instead, she ran at an angle, using the pillars scattered throughout the arena as cover. Wraith's wolf snarled and gave chase. The crowd roared. Sorrel's heart hammered in her chest. She could hear the wolf behind her, closing the distance, could hear the scrape of claws on stone. She ducked behind a pillar just as Wraith lunged, the wolf's jaws snapping shut where her head had been a second before. Keep moving. Stay unpredictable. Sorrel rolled to the side as Wraith came around the pillar, scrambled to her feet, and ran for the next piece of cover. 1 minute down, 4 to go. Wraith was faster, stronger, but Sorrel was smaller, could change direction quicker. She used every trick Kael had taught her, feinting one way, moving another, using the environment, never staying still long enough to become a target. But Wraith was experienced, intelligent. She began to anticipate Sorrel's movements, cut off her escape routes. At the 3-minute mark, Wraith cornered her. Sorrel's back hit a wall, and the massive wolf prowled forward, lips pulled back in a snarl that showed every tooth. Sorrel's mind raced. She couldn't fight, couldn't outrun, couldn't... She dropped to the ground and rolled between the wolf's legs, coming up behind her. Wraith spun, but Sorrel was already moving, putting distance between them. The crowd was going wild now, cheering, shouting. She couldn't tell if they were rooting for her or against her. 4 minutes. Sorrel's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She couldn't keep this up much longer. Wraith knew it too. The wolf's attacks became more aggressive, more reckless. One claw caught Sorrel's shoulder, tearing through leather and skin. Pain exploded across her back, but she didn't stop. 4.5 minutes. Wraith lunged again, and this time Sorrel couldn't dodge fast enough. The wolf's weight slammed into her, driving her to the ground. Massive jaws closed around her throat, not biting, just holding, just showing that she could end this whenever she wanted. Sorrel froze, her pulse thundering against those teeth. The arena fell silent. Then Kael's voice rang out. Time. Wraith released her immediately and shifted back to human form, breathing hard but barely winded. She offered Sorrel a hand. Sorrel took it, letting the commander pull her to her feet. Blood ran down her shoulder, but she was alive. She'd survived. The crowd erupted into noise again, some cheering, some jeering, mixed reactions. But Sorrel had done it. She'd lasted 5 minutes against one of the Frostbound's best warriors. Wraith leaned in close. Not bad, little queen. Let's see if you survive the next 2. Then she walked away, leaving Sorrel standing alone in the center of the arena, bleeding but unbowed. She looked up at Kael. He was on his feet now, his silver eyes blazing with something fierce and proud. And Sorrel knew, with bone-deep certainty, that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. This was her kingdom now, and she would fight for it. The healers worked on Sorrel's shoulder in silence, their hands efficient but not gentle. The wound wasn't deep. Wraith had controlled her strike perfectly, but it burned like fire as they cleaned and stitched it. Sorrel didn't make a sound. She sat in the medical chamber beneath the arena, still wearing her torn leather armor, still covered in sweat and blood and snow. Around her, servants moved quietly, preparing for the next trial. The survival test would begin at sunset, giving her barely 4 hours to rest. 4 hours to prepare to be abandoned in the frozen wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back. You should eat, one of the healers said, gesturing to a tray of food someone had brought. Bread, dried meat, cheese. Simple, but filling. Sorrel's stomach turned. She couldn't imagine eating right now, but she forced herself to take a piece of bread, to chew and swallow mechanically. Kael had drilled it into her during training. Fuel was survival. Her body needed energy, whether she felt like eating or not. The door opened and Kael entered. The healers immediately bowed and retreated to the far side of the chamber, giving them privacy without leaving entirely. Kael crossed to where Sorrel sat and crouched down in front of her, his silver eyes scanning her face, her shoulder, cataloging every injury. "How bad?" he asked quietly. "I'll live," Sorrel said. "That's not what I asked." Sorrel met his gaze. "It hurts, but I've had worse." That was a lie. She'd never been injured like this in her life, but she wasn't about to admit that. Kael's jaw tightened. The survival trial is the hardest for someone without a wolf. You won't have the enhanced senses to find water or shelter. You won't have the body heat regulation to survive the night cold. I know. The temperature drops to lethal levels after dark. If you can't start a fire. I know, Sorrel repeated, more firmly this time. You taught me. I know what I'm facing. Kael studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch, pressing it into her hand. What is this? Sorrel asked. Flint and steel, Kael said quietly, and a small knife. They're allowed to give you one tool. I'm choosing these. Sorrel's fingers closed around the pouch. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Kael stood, but he didn't move away. The drop point is 10 miles north of the city. The terrain is brutal. Ice fields, frozen rivers, cliffs. Most wolves make it back in 2 days because they can run for hours without tiring. You'll need at least 3, maybe 4. I have 2 days, Sorrel said. That's the time limit. I know. Kael's expression was dark. So you'll need to move smart, not fast. Rest when you can. Don't waste energy. And whatever you do, don't try to cross the ice fields at night. You won't see the crevasses until you're falling. Sorrel nodded, committing every word to memory. There's something else, Kael said, his voice dropping even lower. The beast inside me. It's been quiet since you arrived. Quieter than it's been in years. But when you're gone, out in the wilderness alone, he paused. I don't know what will happen. Sorrel's chest tightened. You think it'll come back? I know it will, Kael said. It always does. The question is how strong. Then don't lose control, Sorrel said simply. Kael's laugh was bitter. If it were that easy, I wouldn't need you. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unspoken pressing down between them. Then Kael did something unexpected. He reached out and cupped her face in his hand, his palm warm against her cheek. Come back, he said quietly. Whatever it takes, come back. Sorrel's breath caught. I will. Kael held her gaze for another heartbeat. Then he turned and left, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. Sorrel sat alone, holding the pouch of tools, and tried not to think about what failure would mean. Not just for her, for both of them. The sun was setting when they led her to the gates. The northern gates of Icehaven opened onto a vast expanse of white, snow-covered plains stretching toward distant mountains, broken only by patches of dark forest and the glint of frozen rivers. Beautiful, deadly. A crowd had gathered again, smaller this time, but no less interested. They wanted to see if the Hollow Queen would survive her second trial. Commander Wraith stood near the gate, along with 2 other council members. Varric, the scarred commander, and the blonde woman whose name Sorrel had learned was Elder Senna. The rules are simple, Wraith announced, her voice carrying across the courtyard. You will be taken 10 miles north and left with 1 tool of your choosing. You have 2 days to return to Icehaven. If you don't make it back within that time, you fail. And if I fail? Sorrel asked. Wraith's smile was cold. Then you're not fit to be queen. Simple as that. No second chances. No mercy. Your tool? Elder Senna asked. Sorrel held up the leather pouch. Flint, steel, and a knife. Senna's eyebrows rose. 3 items. The flint and steel are 1 tool, Kael's voice cut in from behind them. He'd appeared silently, now standing at the edge of the courtyard. They're useless separately. That's within the rules. Senna looked like she wanted to argue, but Wraith waved a hand dismissively. Fine, let her have her fire starters. She'll need them. 2 of Kael's men came forward. Finn, the young warrior who'd helped during the journey, and another soldier Sorrel didn't know. They gestured for her to follow. She did, climbing into a sleigh pulled by two massive black horses. The soldiers climbed in after her, and they set off into the wilderness without ceremony. Kyle watched her go, his silver eyes burning in the fading light. Sorrel watched him back until the city disappeared behind them. The ride took 2 hours. They traveled north through increasingly hostile terrain. The snow grew deeper. The wind picked up, howling across the plains like a living thing. The temperature dropped so fast, Sorrel's fingers went numb even inside her gloves. Finally, they stopped at the edge of a frozen forest. "This is it," Finn said, his voice almost apologetic. 10 miles north. You need to head south to get back to the city." Sorrel climbed out of the sleigh, her boots sinking into snow that came up to her knees. "Any advice?" she asked. Finn hesitated. Then he said quietly, "Follow the river. It flows south toward Icehaven. If you lose your bearings, the water will lead you home." The other soldier shot him a sharp look, but Finn ignored it. "Thank you," Sorrel said. He nodded. Then the sleigh turned around and disappeared into the growing darkness, leaving Sorrel alone in the wilderness. The silence was absolute. No birds, no animals, just the wind and the creak of ice and the sound of her own breathing. Sorrel took stock of her situation. She wore leather armor under a heavy fur cloak. She had the knife, the flint and steel, and nothing else. No food, no water, no shelter. And night was falling fast. First priority, fire. She couldn't survive the night without warmth. Kyle had been brutally clear about that during training. The temperature would drop below freezing within hours. Without a fire, she'd be dead by morning. Sorrel looked around, searching for anything she could use. The forest ahead was dense, full of evergreens. That meant wood, but it also meant the wood would be covered in snow and ice. Wet wood wouldn't burn. She'd have to dig. Sorrel waded into the forest, her legs burning from the effort of pushing through deep snow. She searched for dead branches, anything dry enough to catch fire. It took nearly an hour, but she finally found what she needed: a fallen tree, partially sheltered by a rock outcropping. The underside was dry, protected from the snow. Working quickly, she broke off branches and gathered them into a pile. Her fingers were so cold they barely responded to her commands, but she forced them to work. She pulled out the flint and steel, her hands shaking. "Come on! Come on!" She struck the flint once, twice. Sparks flew, but the tinder she'd gathered, dry pine needles and shredded bark, didn't catch. Again. Again. On the 7th try, a tiny flame flickered to life. Sorrel cupped her hands around it, protecting it from the wind, breathing gently to feed it oxygen without blowing it out. The flame grew, catching on the pine needles, spreading to the smaller twigs. Relief flooded through her so intensely, she almost cried. She fed the fire carefully, adding larger branches as it grew stronger, until she had a real blaze going. Heat radiated outward, pushing back the killing cold. Sorrel huddled close to the flames, letting the warmth seep into her frozen body. She'd done it. She'd survived the first night. But dawn was still hours away, and she had 9 more miles to go. The night was endless. Sorrel fed the fire constantly, terrified of letting it die. She dozed in fits and starts, jerking awake every time she heard a sound: the crack of ice, the rustle of wind, the distant howl of something that might have been a wolf. Every howl made her think of Kyle. Was he losing control right now? Was the beast inside him tearing its way out now that she wasn't there to quiet it? She pushed the thought away. She couldn't help him from out here. She could only help herself. When dawn finally broke, pale and gray, Sorrel forced herself to stand. Her body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached from the cold, from sleeping on frozen ground, from the constant tension. But she was alive. She kicked snow over the fire until it was completely out. Leaving a fire burning in this wilderness would be wasteful and dangerous, and oriented herself. South. She needed to go south. Finn had said to follow the river. Sorrel looked around until she spotted it, a frozen ribbon of white cutting through the forest about 100 yards to her right. She started walking. The day was brutal. The snow was deep, making every step exhausting. The wind cut through her cloak like knives, and worst of all, she was getting hungry. Her stomach cramped and growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since that single piece of bread before the first trial. But there was nothing to eat out here, nothing she could reach anyway. She wasn't a hunter, didn't know how to set traps or track game, so she just kept walking. one foot in front of the other, mile after mile. By midday, she'd covered maybe 3 miles. Not nearly fast enough. At this rate, she wouldn't make it back in 2 days. She needed to move faster. But how? She was already exhausted, already pushing her body to its limit. The river. Sorrel stopped and stared at the frozen surface. It was solid ice, flat and smooth. If she walked on the river instead of through the deep snow of the forest, she could move much faster. But Kael's warning echoed in her mind. Don't try to cross the ice fields at night. You won't see the crevasses until you're falling. It was day now, though. She could see, could watch for weak spots. It was a risk, but everything about this trial was a risk. Sorrel stepped out onto the ice. It held. She took another step. Another. The surface was slick, treacherous, but it was solid. And she could move so much faster. Sorrel started to run, or as close to running as she could manage on the ice. A sliding, careful jog that ate up distance without exhausting her legs the way wading through snow did. Miles passed. The sun tracked across the sky. She was going to make it. She was actually going to make it. Then she heard the crack. It was soft at first, almost inaudible over the wind, but then it grew louder, a sharp splitting sound like a tree breaking. Sorrel froze. The ice beneath her feet was fracturing. She looked down and saw the crack spreading outward from where she stood, thin white lines racing across the dark ice. No, no, no! The ice gave way. Sorrel plunged into freezing water so cold it stopped her heart. The current grabbed her immediately, pulling her under, dragging her along beneath the ice. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but fight against the crushing cold and the terrifying darkness. Her lungs burned. Her limbs went numb. This was it. This was how she died. But then something inside her chest, something she'd never felt before, suddenly flared to life. Heat. Not the warmth she felt around Kael, something different, something that belonged only to her. It exploded outward from her core, racing through her veins like wildfire. The water around her began to steam. Sorrel's eyes flew open in shock. Through the dark water she could see light, a golden red glow emanating from her own skin. What was happening? The current was still pulling her, but the heat inside her was growing stronger, pushing back the cold, giving her the strength to fight. She kicked hard, searching for a break in the ice above. There, a gap where the current had pushed 2 sheets apart. Sorrel surged upward and broke the surface, gasping for air. She grabbed onto the edge of the ice and hauled herself out, her whole body shaking violently. But she wasn't freezing anymore. The heat inside her was still there, still burning, keeping her warm even as water streamed from her clothes. Sorrel stared at her hands in shock. They were glowing. Faintly, but unmistakably, a warm golden light pulsed beneath her skin. "What?" she whispered. But she didn't have time to process it. Night was falling again, and she was soaked through. Even with this strange heat inside her, she needed to find shelter, needed to dry her clothes, needed to understand what was happening to her. She stumbled away from the river, back toward the forest, her mind reeling. She wasn't hollow. She'd never been hollow. Something had been inside her all along, something powerful, and it was waking up. Sorrel found shelter in a small cave carved into a hillside. It was barely big enough to fit her, but it was dry and protected from the wind. She started another fire, her hands moving automatically even as her mind raced. The glow beneath her skin had faded, but she could still feel it, a warmth in her chest, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. What was it? A wolf? No, it didn't feel like the wolves she'd seen. It felt different, older, fiercer. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the heat there. "What are you?" she whispered. No answer came, but the warmth pulsed again, as if in response to her voice. Sorrel sat by her fire and tried to make sense of it all. Her stepmother's face flashed in her mind. The way Marin had always looked at her with such cold contempt, the way she'd insisted Sorrel was hollow, defective, worthless. What if it had been a lie? What if Marin had known all along that Sorrel had power? What if she'd done something to hide it, to suppress it? The thought made Sorrel's blood run cold. But why? Why would Marin want to make Sorrel appear hollow? Unless she'd wanted Sorrel weak, powerless, easy to control. Sorrel's hands clenched into fists. She didn't have proof. Not yet. But every instinct she had screamed that she was right. Her stepmother had done this to her, had stolen her power, her wolf, her entire identity. And Sorrel was going to make her pay. But first, she had to survive. She had to get back to Icehaven. And then she'd figure out what she'd become. The second night was easier than the first. Sorrel kept the fire going, kept herself warm, and used the time to dry her clothes as much as possible. The strange heat inside her helped, radiating outward and chasing away the cold. By dawn, she was ready to move again. She had maybe 4 miles left. If she pushed hard, she could make it by sunset, just barely within the 2-day limit. Sorrel set off at first light, following the river again, but staying well away from the ice this time. The miles passed in a blur of exhaustion and determination. Her legs burned. Her shoulder throbbed where Wraith's claws had torn her, her stomach cramped with hunger. But she kept moving. The sun was low on the horizon when she finally saw it. Icehaven. The black walls of the city rose in the distance, solid and real, and there. Sorrel's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She'd made it. Against all odds, against every expectation, she'd survived. She stumbled the last mile, her vision blurring, her body running on nothing but willpower. The gates were open. A crowd had gathered there, smaller than before, but still significant. They'd come to see if she'd return. Sorrel walked through those gates with her head high, her clothes still damp and torn, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. The crowd erupted into noise, shock, disbelief, grudging respect, and standing at the front, his silver eyes blazing with relief and pride, was Kael. Sorrel walked straight to him and stopped. 2 trials down, she said, her voice hoarse. 1 to go. Kael's expression was unreadable. Then he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You came back, he said against her hair. I told you I would, Sorrel whispered, and she felt it again. That warmth between them, that connection, stronger now than ever before. Because something had changed in that frozen river. Something had awakened. And Sorrel knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. The hunt would begin in 3 days. 3 days to rest, to heal, to prepare for the final trial. But that night, as servants drew her a hot bath and brought her food and tended her wounds, Sorrel didn't rest. She stood in front of the mirror in her chambers, staring at her reflection, and she pressed her hand to her chest, calling to that warmth inside her. It responded immediately, flaring to life. Golden light bloomed beneath her skin, spreading outward, making her entire body glow. Sorrel's breath caught. This was what they'd called hollow. This power, this fire, this thing inside her that was so much more than a wolf. What was it? And more importantly, who had taken it from her? The door to her chambers flew open. Kael stood there, his silver eyes wide. I felt it, he said. From across the palace, what? He stopped, seeing the glow emanating from her skin. Sorrel, he breathed. What's happening to you? I don't know, she said honestly, but I think my stepmother does. Kael crossed the room in 3 long strides. What do you mean? The test when I was 13, Sorrel said, the pieces clicking together in her mind. Everyone said I was hollow, but what if I wasn't? What if someone made me appear hollow? What if they bound my power somehow? Kael's expression darkened. That kind of magic exists. Blood binding. It's ancient, forbidden, but it exists. If someone with enough knowledge wanted to suppress a wolf, to hide it, they could, Sorrel finished. But why? Kael demanded. Why would your stepmother want you powerless? Sorrel thought back to her childhood, to the way Marin had always watched her with cold calculation, to the way she'd pushed Sorrel aside the moment Linnea's wolf awakened. Because she wanted Linnea to be the heir, Sorrel said slowly. My father only had daughters. If I'd awakened a powerful wolf, if I'd shown strength, he might have chosen me over Linnea. But if I was hollow, you'd be worthless, Kael said grimly. No threat at all. Rage flooded through Sorrel, hot and fierce. She stole my life, my identity, made me believe I was broken for 7 years. The glow beneath her skin flared brighter, responding to her anger. Kael grabbed her shoulders, his silver eyes boring into hers. Sorrel, listen to me. Whatever is inside you, it's powerful. I can feel it. But you need to learn to control it before the hunt, or it'll consume you. How? I don't know, Kyle admitted. This isn't wolf magic, it's something else. Something I've never felt before. The light pulsed again, brighter now, and suddenly the air in the room grew hot. Uncomfortably hot. Sorrel gasped, trying to pull it back, to contain it. Stop fighting it, Kyle said urgently. Don't push it down. That's what the binding did. You need to accept it, work with it. I don't know how. Then learn, Kyle said. Fast. Because in 3 days you're going into the wilderness alone with nothing but your wits and whatever power you can summon. And if you can't control this, he gestured to the glow, it'll either save you or kill you. Sorrel closed her eyes and tried to breathe, tried to calm the fire raging inside her. Slowly, gradually, the light faded, but the warmth remained, always there, always waiting. When she opened her eyes, Kyle was still watching her, his expression troubled. What am I? Sorrel whispered. I don't know, Kyle said, but we're going to find out. He pulled her close again, and Sorrel let herself lean into his strength just for a moment, because in 3 days she'd face her final trial, and something told her it would be the most dangerous one yet. The next morning, Kyle took her to see someone he called the Keeper. They descended deep beneath the palace, down stairs carved into living rock, through passages so old the stone was worn smooth. Torches lined the walls, their light casting dancing shadows. Finally, they reached a heavy wooden door. Kyle knocked once, then pushed it open. The chamber beyond was vast, its walls lined with shelves that stretched up into darkness. Books, scrolls, ancient artifacts. The air smelled of dust and old magic, and in the center of it all sat an ancient woman. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, her body bent with age, but her eyes, pale blue and sharp as glass, were very much alive. So, she said, her voice surprisingly strong, the Hollow Queen. I've been expecting you. Sorrel blinked. You have? I felt it when you crossed the threshold into Icehaven, the Keeper said. Felt the binding on you weakening. I wondered how long it would take for it to break. You knew? Sorrel demanded. You knew I was bound. I suspected, the Keeper corrected, but I couldn't be sure until you awakened. She gestured to a chair. Sit. Let me see what you're carrying. Sorrel sat, her heart pounding. The Keeper reached out with one gnarled hand and pressed it to Sorrel's chest, right over her heart. The moment they connected, that warmth inside Sorrel exploded. Golden light filled the chamber, so bright Kyle had to shield his eyes. The Keeper didn't flinch. She just smiled. Oh my, she breathed. Oh, child, do you have any idea what you are? No, Sorrel said desperately. Please, tell me. The Keeper pulled her hand back and the light faded. You don't carry a wolf, she said. You carry something far older, far more powerful. She looked at Kyle. Your little queen bears the first flame. Kyle went very still. That's impossible. The first flame is a myth. All myths start somewhere, the Keeper said. The first flame was the original fire, the power that gave birth to all shifter magic. It's been lost for centuries, hidden, waiting for the right vessel. She looked back at Sorrel, and somehow it chose you. Sorrel's mind reeled. I don't understand. How? Why? Because you were strong enough to carry it, the Keeper said simply. The flame doesn't choose the powerful, it chooses the worthy. Those who've suffered, who've endured, who refuse to break. She smiled. You were never hollow, child. You were a forge, waiting to be lit. Tears burned in Sorrel's eyes. My stepmother bound it. Yes, the Keeper said, and that binding is breaking now. The trials, the stress, the danger, they're forcing your power to surface. Soon it'll be free completely, and when it is, she paused, you'll be more powerful than any wolf in the 5 kingdoms. Sorrel looked at Kyle. Even you? Even me, Kyle said quietly. His expression was complicated. Awe, fear, something that might have been hope. The hunt, Sorrel said, turning back to the Keeper. What do I need to know? Control, the Keeper said. The flame responds to emotion, to will. If you panic, if you let fear consume you, it'll burn out of control. But if you can master it, direct it, you'll be unstoppable. How do I master it in 3 days? The Keeper's smile was grim. You don't. You learn to coexist with it, to listen to it. The flame is alive in its own way. It wants to help you. Let it. Sorrel nodded, committing every word to memory. They left the keeper's chamber with more questions than answers. But Sorrel finally understood one thing. She wasn't broken. She never had been. And everyone who'd ever made her feel worthless was about to learn exactly what she was capable of. The day of the hunt arrived too quickly. Sorrel stood at the northern gates again, but this time she wasn't afraid. She wore light leather armor, carried the knife Kale had given her, and felt the flame burning steady and sure in her chest. The rules were simple. Track the target, a white stag that lived in the deep wilderness, kill it, and bring back proof. Alone. Most completed the hunt in a day. Some took longer. The crowd gathered to watch her leave was massive this time. Word had spread about her survival of the first 2 trials, about the Hollow Queen who refused to break. They wanted to see if she'd complete the impossible. Commander Wraith stood at the gate, her expression unreadable. Your target waits in the northern forests. Good luck, little queen. Sorrel nodded and walked through the gates. Kael watched her go, and she felt his eyes on her back the whole way. Come back, he'd said that morning. Come back to me. She would. But first, she had a stag to hunt. Sorrel moved through the forest like a ghost. She'd learned from the survival trial, learned to read the land, to move quietly, to conserve energy. But tracking was different. She'd never done this before, didn't know what signs to look for, except the flame knew. Sorrel stopped and closed her eyes, letting the warmth in her chest expand. She reached out with senses she didn't know she had, feeling for life, for movement, for the pulse of living things in the forest around her. And she felt it. A heartbeat, strong and steady. Miles to the north, the stag. Sorrel's eyes snapped open, and she started to run. Hours passed. The sun climbed and fell. Sorrel didn't stop. She followed that heartbeat like a compass, never losing it, never faltering. And finally, as dusk began to fall, she saw it. The white stag stood in a clearing, its coat gleaming like snow, its antlers massive and proud. It was the most beautiful thing Sorrel had ever seen. She drew the knife, her hand steady. This was it. Kill the stag, bring back proof, complete the trials. Prove she was worthy. The stag turned its head and looked directly at her. And Sorrel froze. Because the stag's eyes were wrong. They glowed red, like fire, like blood, like a curse. Sorrel's breath caught as the stag's form began to shimmer, to change. No, not a stag. A trap. The creature exploded outward, its body twisting, growing, becoming something monstrous. Antlers turned to horns, white fur turned black, red eyes burned brighter, and Sorrel realized with bone-deep horror what she was facing. Not a hunt, an execution. The beast roared and charged. Sorrel ran. The beast's claws raked the tree where Sorrel had been standing half a second earlier, shredding bark like paper. She hit the ground rolling, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. This wasn't a stag. This wasn't even a natural creature. The thing was massive, easily twice the size of any wolf she'd ever seen, its body twisted and wrong, as if someone had tried to create a predator from nightmares. Black fur matted with something that looked like oil. Horns that curved back like a demon's crown. And those eyes, burning red, full of hunger and hate. Sorrel scrambled backward as the beast turned toward her, its maw opening to reveal rows of teeth that no herbivore should possess. "What are you?" she gasped. The beast answered by lunging again. Sorrel threw herself sideways, barely avoiding the snapping jaws. Her knife was in her hand. When had she drawn it? But the blade looked pathetically small against this monster. She couldn't fight this thing. She'd die. Unless... The flame pulsed in her chest, hot and urgent, as if saying, "Use me." But Sorrel didn't know how. The keeper had said it responded to will, to emotion, but she'd never actually controlled it. Never tried to direct it into something useful. The beast charged again, and this time Sorrel wasn't fast enough. Its claws caught her across the ribs, tearing through leather and skin. Pain exploded through her side, white-hot and blinding. Sorrel screamed and fell, her vision blurring. The beast loomed over her, its red eyes gleaming with triumph. And something inside Sorrel snapped. No. Not like this. Not after everything she'd survived, not after Greystone, not after Adrian's rejection, not after proving herself in two brutal trials. She was done running, done being afraid, done being weak. The flame answered her rage. It erupted from her chest like an explosion, golden red fire that blazed so bright the entire forest lit up like daylight. Heat poured off her in waves, and when Sorrel screamed, it wasn't in pain anymore. It was fury. The beast stumbled backward, its red eyes widening in something that might have been fear. Sorrel rose to her feet, fire wreathing her arms, her hair whipping around her face as if caught in a wind that didn't exist. "My turn," she snarled. She thrust her hand forward, and the flame obeyed. Fire shot from her palm in a concentrated blast, slamming into the beast's chest. It howled, a sound so terrible Sorrel's ears rang, and staggered back, fur smoldering. But it didn't fall. The creature shook itself and charged again, even faster now, driven by pain and fury. Sorrel gathered the flame again, shaping it this time, directing it into a wall of fire between her and the beast. The creature hit the flames and recoiled, snarling. Sorrel's breath came in ragged gasps. She could feel the flame draining her, pulling energy from somewhere deep inside. She couldn't keep this up forever. She needed to end this. The beast circled the wall of fire, searching for an opening, its intelligence evident in those horrible red eyes. This was a trap. Someone had created this thing, set it loose on the hunt path, knowing Sorrel would come this way. Someone wanted her dead. The thought crystallized everything, made her anger sharper, more focused. Sorrel let the firewall drop and faced the beast directly. "Come on then," she said quietly. The beast lunged, and Sorrel didn't run. She stood her ground, gathered every scrap of the flame she could summon, and released it all at once. The explosion was deafening. Fire erupted in a sphere around her, expanding outward in a wave that incinerated everything in its path. Trees caught fire. Snow vaporized. The very air seemed to burn. And the beast, caught in the center of the inferno, had nowhere to go. Its howl cut off abruptly as the flames consumed it. When the fire finally died down, Sorrel stood in the center of a scorched circle, her whole body shaking with exhaustion. The beast was dead. Reduced to ash and charred bone, she'd won. But she couldn't move, could barely breathe. The flame had taken everything she had, and now her legs gave out. Sorrel collapsed to her knees, then fell forward onto her hands, gasping for air. Around her, the forest burned. She'd done that. Created an inferno with nothing but will and rage. What was she becoming? Footsteps crunched through the ash behind her. Sorrel tried to turn, to defend herself, but her body wouldn't respond. "Easy," a familiar voice said. Kyle dropped to his knees beside her, his silver eyes wide with shock as he took in the destruction, the smoking corpse of the beast, Sorrel herself covered in ash and blood. "How—" Sorrel started, but her voice cracked. "I felt it," Kyle said, pulling her into his arms with surprising gentleness. "Felt the flame from miles away. The whole city felt it." His jaw was tight with barely controlled fury. "Someone tried to kill you." "The hunt," Sorrel managed. "It was supposed to be a stag." "It was," Kyle said grimly. "I checked the records myself. Someone substituted the target. Planted that thing here instead." He looked at the remains of the beast, and something dangerous crossed his face. "Someone on my council," he said quietly. "Someone who wanted you dead." Sorrel's chest tightened. "Who?" "I don't know yet," Kyle said, "but I will find out. And when I do—" The promise in his voice was terrible. He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest. "Can you walk?" "I don't think so," Sorrel admitted. "Then I'll carry you." "The trial is over," Kale interrupted. "You killed the beast. That's proof enough. But the stag doesn't matter anymore." Kyle's silver eyes burned into hers. "You survived an assassination attempt disguised as a trial. You summoned power that hasn't been seen in this kingdom for centuries. You proved yourself 10 times over." He started walking, carrying her through the burning forest like she weighed nothing. "Besides," he added, almost as an afterthought, "anyone who objects can take it up with me personally." Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the fear, Sorrel almost smiled. They emerged from the forest just as the sun was setting. A crowd had gathered at the gates again, but this time it was different. Soldiers, commanders, even some of the council members. They'd all felt the flame, all seen the glow on the horizon, the pillar of fire that had lit up the northern sky. The whispers started immediately when they saw Kael carrying Sorrel, both of them covered in ash and blood. She's alive. What happened? Did you feel that power? Is that blood? Commander Wraith pushed through the crowd, her expression unreadable. Your Majesty, what? Someone, Kael said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade, planted a corrupted beast on the hunt path. Someone tried to kill my queen. The crowd erupted into shocked murmurs. Wraith's eyes narrowed. That's impossible. The hunt target is chosen by lot, witnessed by 3 council members. Then one of those council members is a traitor, Kael said flatly, because that thing in the forest was no stag. He swept past her, carrying Sorrel through the gates. Seal the city, he ordered over his shoulder. No one leaves until I find out who's responsible. Wraith hesitated for only a moment. Then she barked orders, and soldiers scrambled to obey. Kael brought Sorrel straight to the medical chambers. The healers descended immediately, their faces pale as they took in her injuries, the claw marks across her ribs, the burns on her hands from channeling fire, the exhaustion that had her trembling. Leave us, Kael told them once they'd cleaned and bandaged the worst of it. Your Majesty, she needs rest. I said leave. The healers exchanged glances but obeyed, filing out and closing the door behind them. Kael pulled a chair close to the bed where Sorrel lay and sat down heavily, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Sorrel blinked. For what? For bringing you here, for putting you through those trials, for not protecting you better. His jaw clenched. Someone in my own council tried to murder you, and I didn't see it coming. You couldn't have known, Sorrel said. I should have, Kael countered. I'm the king. It's my job to know. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sorrel said, The beast. What was it? Kael's expression darkened. A corruption. Created through blood magic, probably. Someone took a normal animal and twisted it into a weapon. He met her eyes. It would have killed any normal wolf. Even some alphas would have struggled. But I killed it, Sorrel said. You incinerated it, Kael corrected. There's a difference. Another silence. The council saw what I did, Sorrel said quietly. They felt the flame. Yes. They're going to be afraid of me now. Kael's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Good. Fear breeds respect in the Frostbound. They should be afraid of you. Sorrel looked down at her bandaged hands. I'm afraid of me. Kael reached out and took one of her hands in his, careful of the burns. The Keeper said the flame chose you because you were worthy, because you were strong enough to carry it. He squeezed gently. I believe her. What if I lose control? Sorrel whispered. What if next time I can't stop it? Then I'll be there to pull you back, Kael said simply. Their eyes met and something passed between them. Something deeper than the warmth, deeper than the connection they'd felt since that first touch on the cliff. Understanding, trust, maybe even the beginning of something else. Rest, Kael said, releasing her hand and standing. Tomorrow, we deal with whoever tried to kill you. Tonight, you heal. He moved toward the door. Kael, Sorrel called. He stopped, looking back. Thank you, she said, for coming for me. Kael's expression softened. Always. Then he was gone, leaving Sorrel alone with her thoughts and the quiet burn of the flame in her chest. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lay in the darkness, feeling the power coiled inside her, trying to understand it. The flame wasn't just fire. It was something alive, something ancient that responded to her emotions, her will. When she'd been terrified, it had erupted in chaos. But when she'd focused her rage, directed it with purpose, it had obeyed. Control. That was the key. Sorrel closed her eyes and reached inward, seeking that warmth. It flared immediately, eager, waiting. She imagined it as a flame in her palm, small, controlled, useful rather than destructive. Heat gathered in her hand, and when she opened her eyes, a small sphere of golden fire hovered above her palm, casting dancing shadows across the ceiling. Sorrel stared at it in wonder. She'd done that. Created fire from nothing. She closed her fist, and the flame winked out. Then she tried again, and again. each time growing more confident, more precise. By dawn, she could summon fire at will, shape it, control its intensity. It wasn't mastery, but it was a start. Kale came for her at first light. "Can you walk?" he asked. Sorrel tested her legs, rising from the bed carefully. Her ribs ached where the beast had clawed her, but she could move. "Yes," she said. "Good. The council has been summoned. We're going to find out who betrayed you." He led her through the palace corridors, and Sorrel noticed something different immediately. The servants who passed them bowed lower than before. The guards who stood at attention watched her with new awareness, new wariness. Word had spread. They knew what she'd done, what she'd become. The council chamber was packed when they arrived. All the major players were there. Commander Wraith, Commander Varric, Elder Senna, and at least a dozen others. Their faces ranged from curious to hostile to outright fearful. Kale took his seat at the head of the table, and Sorrel stood beside his throne rather than sitting. A deliberate choice. She wasn't here as a supplicant today. She was here as a queen. "Someone," Kale said without preamble, his voice cold and hard, "attempted to murder my queen during the hunt. The creature she faced was not the designated target. It was a corruption, planted deliberately." The council erupted into protest and denial. "That's impossible. The hunt targets are chosen by lot. No one would dare. Enough!" Kale roared, and the chamber fell silent. He leaned forward, his silver eyes scanning each face at the table. 3 council members witnessed the lot for yesterday's hunt: Commander Wraith, Elder Senna, and Advisor Theron. He focused on each of them in turn. "One of you is lying." Wraith's expression was stone. "I witnessed a white stag being chosen, Your Majesty. Nothing else." "As did I," Senna said stiffly. The third man, Advisor Theron, an older noble with nervous eyes, shifted in his seat. I saw the same." "And yet," Kale said softly, dangerously, "my queen nearly died fighting a beast that should never have existed. So either all 3 of you are lying," he paused, "or someone substituted the target after the lot was drawn." Silence. Then Commander Varric spoke up. "With respect, Your Majesty, there's another possibility." Kale's eyes snapped to him. "Which is that your queen is lying." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Explain," Kale said, his voice deadly quiet. Varric didn't flinch. "The girl comes from a disgraced Southern family. She has every reason to fabricate threats to gain sympathy, to cement her position here. Perhaps she encountered a normal stag, killed it, and then created this story about a beast to make herself seem more impressive." "I saw the remains," Kyle said. "That was no stag." "You saw ash and bone," Varric countered. "For all we know, she burned a different creature and claimed it was part of the hunt. We only have her word for what actually happened." Murmurs rippled through the council, some nodding, others looking uncertain. Sorrel's hands clenched at her sides. They were turning this around on her, making her the liar instead of the victim. "You question my integrity," she said quietly. Every eye in the room turned to her. "I question your motives," Varric said. "You arrive here as a rejected bride, hollow and worthless, and suddenly, conveniently, you develop power? You survive trials that should have killed you? It's suspicious." "Suspicious," Sorrel repeated, her voice gaining strength, "or inconvenient for whoever wanted me dead." She stepped forward, and several council members actually leaned back. "You want proof?" Sorrel said. "You want to see what I faced?" She thrust her hand forward and summoned the flame. Fire erupted in the center of the table, not wild, not chaotic, but controlled. Shaped. She formed it into an image of the beast, rendered in golden flames, perfectly detailed down to the red eyes and twisted horns. The council gasped, several members scrambling backward. "This," Sorrel said, her voice ringing through the chamber, "is what hunted me. This is what someone planted in that forest, and this—" She clenched her fist, and the image exploded into an inferno that filled the room, heat washing over everyone present but not burning, not touching. "Is how I killed it." She released the flame, and it vanished, leaving only wisps of smoke. The council sat in stunned silence. "Still think I'm lying, Commander Varric?" Sorrel asked. The scarred man's face was pale, but he held her gaze. "I think you're dangerous." "Yes," Sorrel agreed. "I am. To anyone who threatens me or my king. She looked around the table, meeting each council member's eyes in turn. Someone here tried to kill me. Maybe because they think I'm weak. Maybe because they fear what I'm becoming. I don't know, and frankly, I don't care about their reasons. She smiled, and it wasn't friendly. But I promise you this, when I find out who it was, they'll learn exactly how dangerous I can be. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Kale stood. This council is dismissed, but no one leaves Icehaven until the traitor is found. Commander Wraith, double the guard on all gates. Elder Senna, I want records of everyone who had access to the hunt preparations. And Varric, the commander stiffened. You're confined to your quarters pending investigation, Kale finished. Varric's face flushed with anger. Your Majesty, I have served this kingdom for 30 years, and I'm giving you the opportunity to prove your loyalty, Kale interrupted. Take it as a courtesy. Varric stood, his jaw tight, and stalked from the chamber without another word. The rest of the council dispersed quickly, leaving Kyle and Sorrel alone. That was bold, Kale said once they were gone. That was necessary, Sorrel replied. They needed to see I'm not afraid of them. They're terrified of you now. Good. Kyle studied her for a long moment. You're different than when you arrived. Sorrel thought about the girl who'd walked through Icehaven's gates 3 weeks ago, scared, uncertain, hollow. That girl was gone. I had to be, she said simply. Kale crossed to her and took her hands, his silver eyes intense. The flame is growing stronger. I can feel it. I'm learning to control it, Sorrel said. But for how long? Kyle's grip tightened slightly. The Keeper said it responds to emotion, to will. But what happens when you're angry, when you're afraid? What if I lose control and burn everything down? Sorrel finished. I think about that every second, but I can't let fear of what might happen paralyze me. I have to learn, have to practice. Then let me help you, Kyle said. Whatever you need. Teachers, resources, space to train without destroying the palace. I need answers, Sorrel interrupted. About the binding, about how my stepmother did this to me. Because if I don't understand where the flame came from, how it was hidden, I can't fully control it. Kyle nodded slowly. Then we'll find those answers. Together. The word sent warmth through Sorrel's chest. Not the flame, but something else. Something human. Thank you, she said quietly. You keep thanking me, Kale said. Stop. We're partners in this. You quiet my beast, and I help you master your fire. That's the deal. Is it working? Sorrel asked. The beast. Has it been quiet? Kale's expression darkened. While you were in the forest, when I felt the flame surge, the beast woke up. Tried to take control. He paused. But it was different this time. Instead of wanting to destroy, it wanted to reach you, to protect you. Sorrel's breath caught. Your curse responded to me being in danger? I think our connection runs deeper than either of us realized, Kael said. Your flame and my beast, they're not opposing forces. They're complementary. Fire and ice, destruction and preservation. He stepped closer, and Sorrel felt that familiar warmth bloom between them, stronger now than ever. What does that mean? She whispered. I don't know, Kael admitted, but I think we're about to find out. The investigation into the hunt sabotage took 3 days. During that time, Sorrel trained. Kael gave her access to a private courtyard deep in the palace grounds, warded with ancient magic to contain fire. There, with only him as witness, she practiced, summoning flames, shaping them, controlling their intensity, learning to call the flame without letting rage or fear drive it. It was exhausting, exhilarating, terrifying, but she was getting stronger. On the 3rd day, she managed to create a construct entirely of fire, a wolf made of golden flames that prowled the courtyard, responding to her mental commands. Kyle watched from the edge of the training ground, his silver eyes reflecting the firelight. Impressive, he said, when she finally let the construct dissolve. Sorrel wiped sweat from her forehead, breathing hard. I'm still burning through energy too fast. If I had to maintain that for more than a few minutes, I'd collapse. You've been training for 3 days, Kael pointed out. Most wolves train for years to master their shift. Give yourself time. Time. That was the problem. Sorrel could feel the flame growing stronger each day, pushing at the edges of her control. Soon, it wouldn't be content to simmer quietly anymore. She needed to master it before it mastered her. "Any word on the traitor?" she asked, changing the subject. Kyl's expression hardened. Wraith found something. Financial records showing large payments to advisor Theron from an outside source. Sorrel's pulse quickened. "Outside source?" "Greystone," Kyle said quietly. The word hit like a physical blow. "My family," Sorrel whispered. "Your stepmother, most likely," Kyle corrected. "Theron confessed this morning, said he was paid to substitute the hunt target, to ensure you didn't survive." Rage flooded through Sorrel, hot and immediate. The flame responded, flaring in her chest. "Easy," Kyle said, moving closer. "Don't let it control you." Sorrel forced herself to breathe, to contain the fire threatening to erupt. "She tried to kill me." "Yes. She bound my power for 7 years, made me believe I was nothing, and when I finally escaped, she tried to have me murdered." "Yes," Kyle said again. Sorrel met his eyes, and the fury there must have shown, because he actually stepped back. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. Sorrel thought about it, about Greystone Keep, about her stepmother's cold eyes, about 7 years of humiliation and pain. "I want to go home," she said. Kale nodded. "Then we will. But not yet. Not until you're ready. Not until you can face her with full control of your power." "When?" Sorrel demanded. "Soon," Kale promised. "Very soon." That night, Kyle summoned the council again. They gathered in the great hall, their faces wary. Advisor Theron was notably absent, locked in the dungeons awaiting judgment. Kale stood before them, Sorrel at his side, and addressed the assembly. "The trials are complete," he announced. "Sorrel has proven herself in combat, survival, and the hunt. She has faced assassination and emerged victorious. She has demonstrated power beyond anything this kingdom has seen in centuries." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Therefore I declare the trial satisfied. Sorrel is your queen, by right of trial and by my decree. Anyone who disputes this can challenge her directly." Silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, Commander Wraith stepped forward. Sorrel tensed, expecting another challenge. But Wraith dropped to one knee, her fist over her heart. "I acknowledge you, Queen Sorrel," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "You have proven your strength. You have earned your place." One by one, the other council members followed suit, kneeling, acknowledging. Even Varric, released from confinement after being cleared of involvement, bent his knee with grudging respect. Sorrel stood frozen, overwhelmed by the moment. They were accepting her, finally, truly accepting her. She was no longer the hollow girl from Greystone. She was a queen. Kale's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Say something," he murmured. Sorrel cleared her throat. "I am not the queen you expected," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "I am not from the Frostbound. I do not carry a wolf. I cannot give you the strength you are accustomed to." She paused, letting the flame rise just enough that her eyes began to glow with golden light. "But I can give you fire. I can give you loyalty. And I promise you this, anyone who threatens this kingdom, anyone who harms my people, will learn exactly what happens when you anger the flame." She released the power, and her eyes returned to normal. "I accept your acknowledgement," she finished, "and I swear to serve the Frostbound with everything I am." The council rose, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Sorrel saw something other than doubt in their eyes. She saw respect. Fear, yes, but also respect. It was a start. The ceremony ended and the council dispersed. Kyle led Sorrel back through the palace corridors toward their chambers. "You did well," he said. "I just repeated what you told me to say," Sorrel replied. "You made it yours," Kale corrected. "That's what matters." They reached her door, and Kyle stopped. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. Sorrel's stomach tightened. "What?" "The beast. My curse." Kale's jaw worked. "It's been completely silent since you completed the trials. Not dormant. Not sleeping. Gone." Sorrel's eyes widened. "Gone? How is that possible?" "I don't know," Kael admitted. But the Keeper thinks... She thinks your flame didn't just quiet the curse. It might have consumed it, burned it away. Hope bloomed in Sorrel's chest. You mean you're cured? I don't know if it's permanent, Kael said carefully, but for now, yes. I'm free of it. Tears pricked Sorrel's eyes. Kael, it's because of you, he interrupted, stepping closer. Everything is because of you. You saved my life, Sorrel, in more ways than one. Their faces were inches apart now. Sorrel could feel the warmth radiating between them, stronger than ever. What happens now? She whispered. Kael's hand came up to cup her face. Now, we finish what we started. We go to Greystone. We confront your stepmother. We get you the answers you deserve. And then, Kael said softly, we see where this goes. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. Sorrel didn't. Their lips met, and the world exploded into warmth and light. The flame surged between them, but this time it wasn't destructive. It was joining, merging, two powers recognizing each other, completing each other. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Well, Kael said roughly, that was unexpected, Sorrel finished. I was going to say inevitable, Kael said with a slight smile. Sorrel laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. Get some rest, Kael said, stepping back reluctantly. Tomorrow, we plan. In 3 days, we ride for Greystone. Sorrel nodded, her heart still racing. Kael, she called as he turned to leave. He looked back. I'm glad you found me on that cliff. Kael's expression softened. So am I. Then he was gone, and Sorrel stood alone in the hallway, touching her lips, feeling the flame burn steady and sure in her chest. She'd survived the trials, she'd earned her crown, and now it was time to go home and take back everything that had been stolen from her. The journey back to Greystone took 2 weeks, but this time Sorrel wasn't running away. She was coming home. Kael rode beside her the entire way, leading a company of 50 frostbound warriors, enough to make a statement without declaring war. Commander Wraith led the vanguard, her expression carved from stone, but her eyes sharp with anticipation. Even she seemed eager to see what would happen when the Hollow Bride returned as a queen. The landscape changed as they traveled south. The endless snow gave way to forests, then hills, then the familiar gray stone and coal smoke of Greystone territory. Sorrel felt her chest tighten as the keep came into view on the 3rd morning. Those walls had been her prison for 20 years. The place where she'd learned to make herself small, invisible, worthless. But she wasn't that girl anymore. Are you ready? Kael asked quietly, his horse drawing alongside hers. Sorrel touched the flame in her chest, always there now, always burning steady. Yes. Remember, Kael said, we're here for answers first, justice second. Don't let rage drive you. I won't, Sorrel promised, but even as she said it, she could feel the fire growing hotter at the thought of facing Maren again. They reached Greystone's gates at noon. The guards recognized Sorrel immediately. She saw their eyes widen, saw them exchange confused glances. The hollow Ashford girl, returning with an army at her back and a crown on her head. Open the gates, Kael commanded, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of an alpha king. The guards scrambled to obey. Word spread fast. By the time Sorrel and Kael rode into the courtyard, a crowd had gathered. Servants, soldiers, minor nobles, all of them staring in shock at the spectacle before them. And standing on the steps of the keep, her face pale but composed, was Lady Maren. Sorrel's stepmother wore a gown of deep green, her blonde hair perfectly arranged, her expression carefully neutral. But Sorrel could see the calculation in those cold gray eyes, the rapid assessment of threat and opportunity. Beside Maren stood Linnea, Sorrel's stepsister. The girl looked genuinely shocked, her amber eyes wide with confusion. Lord Ashford was nowhere to be seen. Of course he wasn't. Sorrel dismounted, and Kael followed suit. The frostbound warriors formed a silent wall behind them, a show of strength that made several Greystone soldiers shift nervously. Sorrel, Maren said, her voice smooth as silk. What a surprise. We heard you'd married the Alpha King, but we didn't expect... Where's my father? Sorrel interrupted. Maren's smile didn't falter. Away on business, He'll be terribly disappointed to have missed you. A lie. Sorrel could see it in the way Marin's fingers twitched against her skirts. Lord Ashford was probably in his study, too cowardly or too ashamed to face her. "We need to talk," Sorrel said. "Inside, now." "Of course," Marin said graciously, "though I must say arriving with an army seems rather excessive for a family visit." Kael stepped forward, his silver eyes cold. "Your family tried to have my queen murdered. I'd say an army is perfectly appropriate." The color drained from Marin's face, just for a moment. Then the mask slipped back into place. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said. "Inside," Sorrel repeated. "Unless you'd prefer to discuss your treason in front of everyone?" Marin's jaw tightened, but she turned and led them into the keep. The great hall looked exactly as Sorrel remembered. The same tapestries on the walls, the same cold stone floors, the same oppressive atmosphere that had suffocated her for years. But now she saw it for what it really was. Small. Provincial. Nothing compared to Icehaven's grandeur. Marin gestured to chairs near the fireplace, playing the gracious hostess. Sorrel didn't sit, neither did Kael. Advisor Theron confessed, Sorrel said without preamble. "He told us everything. How you paid him to sabotage the hunt. How you wanted me dead." "That's absurd," Marin said, but her voice had lost some of its smoothness. "Why would I want you dead? Your family." "Because I was never supposed to be anything," Sorrel said, her voice rising. "I was supposed to stay hollow, stay powerless, stay in Greystone and fade into obscurity. But I didn't. I survived. I became a queen, and that threatened whatever plans you had." "You're paranoid," Marin said. "The trials, the stress, they've clearly affected your judgment." "The binding," Sorrel said, cutting through the deflection like a knife. "When did you do it? Was it during the awakening ceremony or before?" For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Marin's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You bound my power," Sorrel pressed. "You used blood magic to suppress the flame inside me, to make me appear hollow, didn't you?" Silence. Then Linnea spoke up from where she stood near the door. "Mother, what is she talking about?" "Nothing," Marin snapped. "She's making up stories to justify abandoning her family." "Don't," Sorrel said quietly, dangerously. "Don't lie to her, too." She took a step forward, and the temperature in the room rose noticeably. The flame was responding to her anger, pressing against her control. "Tell the truth," Sorrel demanded. "Why did you bind me?" Marin's composure cracked. "Because you were a threat," she burst out. "Do you have any idea what I felt when you were born? The power radiating from you, even as an infant. You weren't a wolf. You were something else. Something that would have made Brennan choose you over Linnea, over my daughter." Linnea gasped. "Mother, what are you saying?" "She carries the first flame," Marin continued, her voice bitter. "An ancient power that hasn't been seen in centuries. If the elders had discovered it during your awakening, you would have been taken away, trained by the old families, groomed for leadership. Linnea would have been nothing in comparison." "So you stole my power," Sorrel said. "You condemned me to 7 years of thinking I was broken, of being treated like garbage by everyone, including you." "I did what I had to do to protect my family," Marin said coldly. "Linnea deserved to be the heir, not some freak with unnatural fire magic." The words hit harder than Sorrel expected. Even now, even knowing the truth, hearing her stepmother's contempt still hurt. But the flame surged in response, burning away the pain with pure fury. "And when I escaped?" Sorrel asked. "When I married Kael and became queen anyway. You couldn't stand it, could you? Couldn't stand that I'd found power despite what you did to me." "You should have stayed dead," Marin spat. "That beast should have torn you apart. Then everything would have gone back to normal." "Mother!" Linnea's voice cracked with horror. "You tried to kill her?" "I did what was necessary," Marin said, turning to her daughter. "Don't you see? She was always going to be a threat. Always going to take what should have been yours." "I never wanted anything from her," Linnea cried. "She's my sister." "She's nothing to us," Marin said viciously. That was the final straw. Sorrel's control snapped. The flame erupted from her in a wave of golden fire that swept through the hall, setting tapestries ablaze, cracking stone, turning the air itself into a furnace. Marin stumbled backward with a scream. "Sorrel!" Kael's voice cut through the roar of flames. Control it! But Sorrel didn't want to control it. She wanted to burn, wanted to reduce this place and everything it represented to ash. Sorrel, Kael said again, moving to stand beside her. His hand found hers, and his touch was ice against her fire. This isn't you. Don't become what she feared. The words pierced through the rage. Sorrel gasped, pulling the flame back with effort. The fire died down, leaving scorch marks across the walls and floor, but nothing permanently destroyed. She was shaking, her whole body trembling with the effort of containment. How did you do it? She asked Marin, her voice hoarse. The binding. How? Marin was pressed against the wall, her face pale with terror, but she still had enough pride to sneer. Blood magic. A ritual passed down through my family. We've always known how to suppress things that need suppressing. Remove it, Sorrel demanded. I can't, Marin said. The binding is already broken. You broke it yourself when you awakened the flame. There's nothing left to remove. Sorrel studied her stepmother's face, searching for lies. But she saw only bitter truth. The binding was gone. The damage was done. And no amount of revenge would give Sorrel back those 7 lost years. What happens now? Linnea asked quietly. She was crying, Sorrel realized, tears streaming down her face as she looked between her mother and her stepsister. Sorrel, I swear I didn't know. I never would have. I know, Sorrel said, and meant it. Linnea had been young during the awakening, barely 10 years old. She'd been as much a pawn in Marin's games as Sorrel had. You can't prove any of this, Marin said, recovering some of her composure. It's your word against mine. Blood magic leaves no trace. I don't need proof, Kael said, speaking for the first time since entering the hall. You confessed. We all heard it. That's enough. Enough for what? Marin asked warily. For this, Kael said. He gestured to Commander Wraith, who'd been standing silently near the entrance. Take Lady Marin into custody. She'll stand trial in Icehaven for conspiracy to commit murder. Wraith moved forward with 2 other warriors. You can't do this, Marin protested. I'm a noblewoman of Greystone. You have no authority here. I'm an Alpha King, Kael said flatly. I have authority everywhere. And you tried to kill my queen. That gives me all the authority I need. Marin looked to Sorrel, something desperate creeping into her eyes. Sorrel, please, I raised you, fed you, gave you a home. You gave me nothing, Sorrel said quietly. You took everything. My power, my childhood, my sense of worth. You made me believe I was hollow when I carried fire. She met her stepmother's eyes. I could burn you to ash right now. Part of me wants to, but I'm not going to. Why not? Marin asked bitterly. Because I'm not you, Sorrel said. I don't destroy people just because they threaten me. You'll face justice, real justice, not revenge. Wraith took Marin's arm, and the older woman sagged in defeat. As they led her away, Sorrel turned to Linnea. You're not responsible for what she did. Linnea wiped her eyes. I should have seen it, should have questioned. You were a child, Sorrel interrupted. We both were. She manipulated both of us. She paused. What will you do now? I don't know, Linnea admitted. He's not well, hasn't been for years. The business with Greystone, with the family, I think it'll fall to me now. You'll do better than he did, Sorrel said. Better than she did. Linnea's smile was watery but genuine. I hope so. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Linnea said, I'm glad you're not dead. I'm glad you found power, found yourself. She hesitated. I'm proud of you, Sorrel. Something in Sorrel's chest cracked open. She'd never heard those words from anyone in her family. Never thought she would. Thank you, she whispered. Linnea nodded and left, leaving Sorrel alone with Kael in the scorched great hall. There's one more thing you need to do, Kael said gently. Sorrel knew what he meant. My father. He owes you an explanation too, or at least an apology. Sorrel didn't want to see Lord Ashford, didn't want to face the man who'd turned away from her when she needed him most. But Kael was right. She needed closure. They found him in his study exactly where Sorrel had expected. Lord Brennan Ashford sat behind his desk, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside him. He looked older than Sorrel remembered, his hair more gray, his face more lined, his eyes hollow. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe, or fear. "Sorrel," he said hoarsely. "Father," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. They stared at each other across the study. "I heard what Marin did," Lord Ashford said finally. "The binding. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "Does it matter?" Sorrel asked. "You knew I needed you after the awakening. You knew I was suffering, and you turned away. I didn't know how to help you," her father said, his voice breaking. "You weren't what I expected, what I needed, and I failed you. I know that now." Sorrel felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I spent 7 years thinking I was worthless because you made me believe it." "I'm sorry," Lord Ashford whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't give me back those years," Sorrel said. "Sorry doesn't change what happened. I know." Her father stood, moving around the desk toward her. "But I'm saying it anyway. You deserved better. Deserved a father who saw you for what you were instead of what you lacked." He stopped a few feet away, as if afraid to come closer. "You're a queen now," he said. "You're powerful, strong, everything I should have known you could be." He smiled sadly. "Your mother would be proud." Sorrel's breath caught. "Don't." "She would," Lord Ashford insisted. "She always said you were special. Even as a baby, she knew. I should have listened to her." Sorrel closed her eyes, fighting back the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. When she opened them again, she said, "I forgive you." Her father's eyes widened. "What?" "I forgive you," Sorrel repeated. "Not because you deserve it, not because it makes what you did right, but because I'm tired of carrying this anger, tired of letting it burn me up inside." She took a breath. "I'm letting it go. All of it." Lord Ashford's face crumpled, and he actually fell to his knees. "Thank you," he choked out. "Thank you." Sorrel looked down at him, this man who'd had such power over her life, now broken and weeping, and felt nothing but pity. "Goodbye, father," she said quietly. Then she turned and left, Kael falling into step beside her. They walked out of Greystone Keep together, and Sorrel didn't look back. The ride back to Icehaven felt different, lighter somehow, as if leaving Greystone behind had lifted a weight Sorrel hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Marin rode with them, under guard, silent and defeated. She'd face trial when they returned, face judgment from the frost-bound council. Sorrel didn't know what the sentence would be, and she found she didn't much care. Justice would be served. That was enough. On the 5th night of the journey, Kael found Sorrel standing at the edge of their camp, staring up at the stars. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much on my mind," Sorrel admitted. Kael moved to stand beside her. "Want to talk about it?" "I thought confronting her would feel better," Sorrel said. "Thought getting answers would give me closure, but I just feel empty." "That's normal," Kael said. "Revenge doesn't fill holes, it just creates new ones." "Then what does fill them?" Sorrel asked. Kael was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Purpose. Connection. Moving forward instead of looking back." Sorrel looked at him. "Is that what you did? After killing your father?" Kael flinched slightly. They'd never talked about that directly. "My father was a monster," he said finally. "The curse made him cruel, violent. By the time I killed him, there was nothing left of the man he'd been. I told myself I did it to save the kingdom, to end his suffering." He paused. "But the truth is, I did it to save myself. And for years I regretted it, hated myself for it." "What changed?" Sorrel asked. "You," Kael said simply. "You showed me that the past doesn't define us, that we can choose who we become, regardless of what's been done to us." He turned to face her fully. "You were broken and rebuilt yourself. You were powerless and found strength. You were nothing and became everything." Sorrel felt warmth spread through her chest. Not the flame this time, something deeper. "I couldn't have done any of it without you," she said. "Yes, you could have," Kael disagreed. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." He reached out and took her hand, and that familiar connection sparked between them, fire and ice, destruction and preservation, two broken pieces finding wholeness together. "What happens now?" Sorrel asked. "After the trial?" After everything settles? Now, Kael said, we rule together. We make the Frostbound stronger. We build something better than what we inherited. He smiled. And maybe we figure out what this is between us. And what is it? Sorrel asked, her heart racing. I don't know yet, Kael admitted, but I want to find out. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. Sorrel didn't. Their lips met, and the world fell away. There was only warmth and connection and the sense of coming home to a place she'd never been. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. We should get back to camp, Kael said reluctantly. Probably, Sorrel agreed, but neither of them moved. They stood there under the stars, hands intertwined, and for the first time in her life, Sorrel felt completely at peace. The trial lasted 2 days. The council heard testimony from Advisor Theron, from Sorrel, from Kael. They reviewed financial records, magical assessments, everything. In the end, the verdict was unanimous. Lady Marin was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, of using forbidden blood magic, and of crimes against the crown. The sentence was exile. She would be stripped of title and lands, banned from ever returning to the Frostbound or Greystone territories, and sent to the far southern kingdoms where she had no power, no allies, no resources. It was mercy, really. Many on the council had called for execution, but Sorrel had requested exile instead. Not because she forgave Marin, but because death was too easy. Let her stepmother live with what she'd done. Let her spend the rest of her days as nothing, just as she'd tried to make Sorrel. When the guards led Marin away for the last time, she looked back at Sorrel with pure hatred in her eyes. Sorrel met that gaze calmly and said nothing. She'd already won. The coronation happened a week later. Kael had insisted, said that while Sorrel was already queen by marriage and by trial, the people needed a formal ceremony, needed to see her crowned, officially recognized, celebrated. Sorrel stood before the assembled court of the Frostbound, wearing a gown of deep red and gold that seemed to shimmer like living flame. The keeper had woven protective wards into the fabric, said it would help Sorrel channel the flame without burning through the material. Kael placed the crown on her head, a circlet of silver and gold, forged in the shape of flames and ice crystals intertwined. I present to you, Kael announced, his voice carrying through the great hall, Sorrel Thorn, Queen of the Frostbound, bearer of the first flame. The crowd erupted into cheers. Not all of them were genuine. Sorrel could see the calculation in some faces, the fear in others. But enough of them were real. Enough of them had seen what she could do, had witnessed her strength, and chose to respect it. Commander Wraith stepped forward and dropped to one knee. My queen, she said formally, I pledge my sword to your service. Others followed suit. Warriors, nobles, even some who doubted her during the trials. Sorrel looked out at them, her people now, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was real. This was permanent. She was no longer running from her past. She was building a future. Rise, she said, her voice steady and strong. All of you, rise. We have work to do. The months that followed were hard. Ruling wasn't as simple as Sorrel had imagined. There were disputes to settle, resources to manage, alliances to forge. The Frostbound was a harsh kingdom, and its people expected strong leadership. But Sorrel learned. With Kael at her side, with Wraith and the council to advise her, she learned. She established new trade agreements with the southern territories, implemented reforms to help the poorest packs survive the brutal winters, created training programs for young shifters, regardless of their wolf's strength. And she practiced with the flame every day, sometimes alone in the warded courtyard, sometimes with Kael, learning to balance fire and ice, to create things together that neither could manage apart. The keeper visited often, teaching Sorrel the old ways, the history of the first flame, and those who'd carried it before. You're not the first, the ancient woman said one afternoon as they sat in her underground chambers. But you might be the strongest. The flame chose well. Why me? Sorrel asked. I still don't understand. I wasn't brave or special. I was just broken. The flame doesn't choose the unbroken, the keeper said. It chooses those who know suffering, who understand darkness, because only they can properly wield light without being blinded by it. She smiled. You were never broken, child. You were being forged. Sorrel thought about that often in the days that followed. about how her pain had shaped her, how her struggles had made her strong, how being hollow had taught her to fill herself with something better than what others expected. She'd been forged in fire long before the flame awakened. Winter came to the Frostbound, harsh and beautiful. Sorrel stood on the balcony of her chambers, watching snow fall over Icehaven, and marveled at how much had changed in less than a year. She'd gone from rejected bride to queen, from hollow to powerful, from nothing to everything. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and Kael rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How strange life is," Sorrel said. "A year ago, I was standing on a cliff ready to jump. Now I'm standing in a palace, watching snow fall on my kingdom." "Our kingdom," Kael corrected gently. "Our kingdom," Sorrel agreed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Kael said, "I have something for you." He pulled back and held out a small wooden box. Sorrel took it carefully and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple silver, with a single ruby that glowed like captured fire. "It's not a proposal," Kael said quickly. "We're already married. But it is a promise. A real one this time, not one made out of desperation." "What kind of promise?" Sorrel asked, her throat tight. "That I'll stand beside you," Kael said. "Not as your king, but as your partner, your equal, your—" He hesitated. "Your love, if you'll have me." Sorrel's eyes burned with tears. "You love me? I think I've loved you since you told me yes on that cliff," Kael admitted. "I just didn't know what to call it, until now." Sorrel turned to face him fully, the ring still clutched in her hand. "I love you too," she said. "You saw me when I was nothing. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You helped me become who I was always meant to be." Kael cupped her face in his hands. "You did that yourself. I just got to witness it." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Sorrel slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, the rivers thawed, green things began to grow again. And on the first day of spring, Sorrel stood before the people of Icehaven in the great arena where she'd fought her first trial. But this time, she wasn't fighting. She was showing them what she'd learned. The flame rose around her in a column of golden fire, but it didn't burn, didn't destroy. Instead, it shaped itself into images. Wolves running, mountains rising, stars wheeling overhead. Art made of fire. Beauty born from what had once been only destruction. The crowd watched in awed silence as Sorrel created entire stories in flame, showing them the history of the Frostbound, the legends of old, the future she hoped to build. When she finally let the fire fade, the arena erupted into cheers. These weren't the grudging acknowledgments of the coronation. These were genuine, joyful. Her people had accepted her. Finally, fully. Kael met her at the edge of the arena, pride blazing in his silver eyes. "Show off," he said with a smile. "I learned from the best," Sorrel replied. They walked back to the palace together, hand in hand, and Sorrel realized something. She was happy, not the desperate, fragile happiness of someone clinging to survival, but real, deep, solid happiness. The kind that came from knowing who you were and being content with it. She'd been rejected, humiliated, broken down and built back up. But she'd survived, more than survived. She'd flourished, and she'd learned something in the process, something important. Power wasn't about what you were born with. It wasn't about bloodlines or wolves or natural gifts. Power was what you did with what you had, how you chose to respond when life tried to destroy you. She'd been called hollow, worthless, nothing. And she'd proven every single one of them wrong, not by becoming what they expected, but by becoming something entirely her own. Years later, when people told the story of the Hollow Bride, they would talk about the trials, about the fire, about the queen who rose from nothing to rule the frozen north. But Sorrel knew the real story was simpler than that. It was about a girl who refused to accept what the world told her she was. A girl who found fire in her emptiness. A girl who learned that sometimes being broken was just the first step to becoming whole. She'd been hollow once, but she'd filled that hollow space with flame, with strength, with love. And she'd become a queen, not because someone gave her a crown, but because she'd forged one herself, in the fire of her own making, The story ended the way all good stories should. Not with a perfect resolution, not with all wounds healed and all questions answered, but with a beginning. Sorrel stood on the balcony of Icehaven Palace, the first flame burning steady in her chest, Kael's hand warm in hers, and looked out at the kingdom spread before her. Her kingdom, their kingdom. And she smiled. Because for the first time in her life, she knew exactly who she was. Not the hollow girl, not the rejected bride, not the broken daughter or the desperate refugee. Just Sorrel, queen of fire and ice, bearer of the first flame. And that was enough. It had always been enough. She just hadn't known it yet.